Chapter 145. It was the third hour after the 3 murders in Dongdu. In the heavy rain that had lasted for a day, 2 Toyota SUVs drove out of the downtown area of Dongdu and headed for the Holy Mountain in the southwest of Dongdu with a clear purpose. The Holy Mountain was called Hibiscus Peak. It was close to the Pacific coast and covered with snow all year round. It was one of the symbols of the whole East Island, and one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. It was the Holy Mountain in the hearts of all the people of East Island. The Divine Wind Force, the central organization of the Special Warfare System of East Island, was located on the Holy Mountain. The 2 off-road vehicles followed the mountain road all the way up. As the height rose, it seemed that even the rainstorm had lessened a little. In the distance where the mist was dense, the snow-covered Hibiscus Peak looked elegant and holy. However, against the backdrop of the night, there was an additional trace of gloomy beauty. The vehicles entered the mountainside, made a turn, and drove into an area that was not open to tourists on weekdays. Then they continued to go up. After 500 meters, the first sentry post appeared. Sentinels in special white military uniforms that almost blended with the snow raised their guns and stepped forward. The windows of the 2 cars were rolled down. Facing the sharp and vigilant sentinels, the driver did not show his ID, but only showed 2 badges. One was luxurious, and the other was ancient. The sentinels, who were on guard, stood up straight and saluted reflexively. Without saying a word, they waved their hands to let them go. If these 2 badges appeared in front of ordinary soldiers, 9 out of 10 people would not recognize them. But here was the Divine Wind Force, the power center of the Special Warfare System of East Island, the headquarters of the most powerful and elite Special Warfare Force in East Island. For everyone here, these 2 badges were worth dying for. The luxurious badge represented the office of the Prime Minister, and the ancient badge represented the royal family. Even if a beggar held these 2 badges, they would unreservedly offer their loyalty, even their lives. The SUVs moved forward side by side. After passing 2 more sentry posts, a snow city appeared in front of the 2 SUVs. This was indeed a city in the snow. Although the city walls were extremely short, through the rain and snow, the inside of the city walls could be said to be vast. In the center of the short city walls was a tower up to 6 or 7 meters high. On the tower, the 2 Japanese characters Divine Wind were as red as blood and looked very eye-catching. There were very few guards on the city wall in the heavy rain. In the center of the city gate below the tower, a figure in a tight black suit with a headscarf on his head stood quietly. He carried a katana on his back. In the white snow, the black figure was clear and blurry. At first glance, he looked like a statue standing at the city gate, ancient and silent. The 2 off-road vehicles that were about to enter the city stopped abruptly. The car door opened. 2 middle-aged men from East Island, who looked to be in their 40s or 50s, got off at the same time and walked quickly to the black figure in front of the city gate. Huge snow stepped on the snow, making a crisp sound. In front of the city gate, the black figure in black clothes suddenly opened his eyes. An indescribable sense of danger suddenly burst out from him. It was not a horrible sword intent, but a kind of tenacity and gloominess that made people breathless. His eyes were bright, but the light was extremely obscure. As the light flowed, it seemed to be full of blood and darkness. The 2 middle-aged men who were about to walk in front of him froze, and subconsciously stopped 10 meters away. "Your Highness Miyamoto, why are you here?" A middle-aged man whispered in surprise, with undisguised respect in his tone. "Shinichi Miyamoto, the palace master of Lyohua Palace in East Island, the commander-in-chief of the Divine Wind Force, and the only supreme ninja in the martial arts world of East Island." Shinichi Miyamoto, who was in charge of the Divine Wind Force all year round, unexpectedly appeared outside the city gate in the heavy rain tonight. Obviously, he was not here to welcome them, even if they were representing the Mikado and the Prime Minister. Waiting for someone. The bright light in Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes gradually became peaceful. He stood still, letting the heavy rain fall, and said in a hoarse voice, "Matsushita and Zuaha came here late at night. Is it an order from His Majesty and the Prime Minister?" In recent years, because of the existence of night spirit in East Island, the Divine Wind Force didn't have many opportunities to go out to carry out tasks directly. Shinichi Miyamoto was not very familiar with the two men standing in front of him at this time, but he could vaguely remember their names. These two men didn't have any actual positions in the imperial palace and the prime minister's residence, but they were one of the most important aides of the Mikado and the prime minister. They came to Divine Wind in the rain late at night, so something important must have happened. Yes, Your Highness Miyamoto. Something important happened in Dongdu tonight. His Majesty and the Prime Minister think it's time for the Divine Wind Force to serve East Island. Song Xiaoying lowered his head, and his tone became more and more respectful. As the confidant of the Mikado, he looked ordinary and plain, and he had a scholarly air about him that matched his identity as an aide. He was like a senior scholar, which made people feel very comfortable. He was less than 50 years old this year, and among the aides of the Mikado, he was really young and vigorous. All the information showed that within 5 years, Song Xiaoying was very likely to become the chief of the aides of the Mikado. In the whole East Island, he could be said to be a very important figure. Shinichi Miyamoto was calm and collected, and his eyes were as calm as snow. He lowered his eyelids and became quiet again. When this supreme ninja of the invincible realm was motionless, not to mention his momentum, even his vitality seemed to be completely restrained, like a dead thing. Your Highness Miyamoto, a few hours ago, there were murders in Chiyo District, Central District, and Shinjuku District. We have confirmed that, including Miyamoto Shiny Eye, 3 superiors of the Thunder-Shocking Realm have been killed in their own districts. More than 10 superiors of the Fire-Flaming Realm died, and countless ordinary elites were killed and injured. There were 3 murderers. At present, we can confirm that the one who killed Miyazawa Xiong in Chiyo District is Wang Shengxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. And the one who appeared in the Central District is very likely to be Gu Hanshan, the heir of Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State. We can't confirm the murderer in Shinjuku District yet. We found some videos in Shinjuku District, and we can only confirm that the murderer is also a young man, but the specific identity is unknown. Zhuohe Hengxin, who came from the advisor group of the Prime Minister's residence, said in a cold tone. Different from Song Xiaoying, who looked very kind. Zhuohe Hengxin's face was gloomy, and his momentum was extremely cold. Although the advisors of the Prime Minister's residence did not hold specific official positions, they often handled some administrative affairs for the Prime Minister. After staying with the Prime Minister for a long time, Zhuohe Hengxin naturally had an unusual momentum. But at this time, standing in front of Shinichi Miyamoto, the Supreme Ninja of Heaven, all his domineering and elegant demeanor were deliberately restrained. The Wang family of Beihai? Zhongzhou State? Shinichi Miyamoto suddenly opened his eyes, and subconsciously took a step forward. The snow under his feet was pockmarked by the rain, but the place where Shinichi Miyamoto originally stood was flat, not even a footprint, leaving no trace in the snow. Song Xiaoying and Zhuohe Hengxin bowed at the same time. If that's the case, things will be very troublesome. Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said slowly. The aura that he had restrained to the extreme was released slowly, as if endless darkness was falling on the holy mountain. The darkness swallowed the snow and the rain, and the whole world seemed to be in darkness. Shinichi Miyamoto looked serious. Song Xiaoying and Zhuohe Hengxin also looked serious. If things were really as they thought, then this time it was more than troublesome. Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. The governor of Samsara challenged the god of war of Zhongzhou State, which had attracted the attention of the whole world. Currently, a large number of masters and elites of East Island had all gone to Zhongzhou State. East Island's Special Warfare Force and master teams were in a state of fatal weakness. Did Zhongzhou State still have the power to plot against East Island at this time? Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanshan, they were the famous young heavenly sons in the whole dark world. And the third person who appeared in Shinjuku tonight, was he a hidden figure of the young generation of Zhongzhou State? Was everything that happened tonight a small, individual operation? Or a prelude to a large-scale invasion? If it was just a prelude, then it could only mean that when countless masters of East Island sneaked into Zhongzhou State, a large number of elites of Zhongzhou State also entered East Island. Once this speculation was established, Shinichi Miyamoto's face suddenly turned darker. Everyone thought that Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. Under such circumstances, Zhongzhou State still dared to send forces to East Island, which could only mean that it was impossible for Zhongzhou State to change dramatically. The master of Samsara Palace and the god of war of Zhongzhou State would fight, but they wouldn't fight to the death. Samsara and Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island? What about the two invincible realm masters and a large number of experts who had entered Zhongzhou State? The rain was pouring heavily. Shinichi Miyamoto felt cold all over. Investigate. The supreme ninja of East Island stayed silent for 5 minutes, and then said in a cold tone, investigate the movements of the 12 super masters of Samsara, and all the entry and exit records of East Island in the past month. The young heavenly sons of the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City entered East Island, and I'm afraid there are a lot of elites of Zhongzhou State with them that we haven't found. We have to find out. The Divine Wind Force will be dispatched immediately. Mr. Songxia, Mr. Zhuaha, what's the order of His Majesty and the Prime Minister? Song Xiaoying paused and said slowly, His Majesty and the Prime Minister mean that we must control Wang Shengxiao, Guhan's Han, and the young man who committed murder in Shinjuku. These three are likely to be the core of the next generation of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. If the worst happens, they will be very important hostages. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded expressionlessly and said, the Divine Wind Force is qualified for this task. In addition, tell His Majesty the Mikado and the Prime Minister that I suggest waking up the Kusanagi force immediately, just in case. The faces of the two top aides from the Imperial Palace and the Prime Minister's residence changed dramatically, but they didn't dare to say anything. They hurriedly turned around, got on the off-road vehicle, and left quickly. Both of them felt that it was ridiculous to wake up the Kusanagi force, but it was obvious that Shinichi Miyamoto's sense of crisis was much stronger than theirs. They had to convey this very important suggestion to their master as soon as possible. Shinichi Miyamoto watched the two off-road vehicles leave. He forcibly suppressed the urge to go back and give orders, and quietly waited where he was. The storm was howling in the air. In a very distant place, the rain seemed to tilt slightly and then stop. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes froze, and he remained calm. The rain all over the sky seemed to be getting smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared completely 1 second later. The storm was still raining heavily in front of the city, but there seemed to be a domain around Shinichi Miyamoto, and all the rain disappeared without a trace. Miyamoto, long time no see. A soft and almost demonic voice rang out, echoing between the snow and the storm, misty and uncertain. Shinichi Miyamoto suppressed his inner agitation and said flatly, you're the #1 killer on the killer list. Now that you've come to the Divine Wind Force, don't you dare to show up in front of me? Oh, provocation doesn't work on me. This is the Divine Wind Force, and Miyamoto has opened his domain. I have to keep a low profile. Although it's a little rude, I believe Miyamoto can understand, right? The evil and soft voice continued to ring out, echoing softly between heaven and earth. The #1 killer in the dark world and the only killer of the invincible realm, codenamed Evil. No one knew why he showed up in East Island, not even Shinichi Miyamoto. However, the supreme ninja of East Island obviously didn't have the patience to say more. He said impatiently, Evil, if you have anything to say, just say it. I don't have time to chat with you here. Heh. In the void of the rainstorm, Evil's voice echoed in Shinichi Miyamoto's ears. It's just a small matter. I want to invite Miyamoto to Zhongzhou State to help me kill someone. What do you think? Shinichi Miyamoto's heart skipped a beat, and then he sneered. Why should I help you? An inexplicable request. What if I say that the person I'm going to kill this time is completely in the interest of East Island? Evil's voice seemed to be a little lower. Once this person dies, the Samsara Palace will. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and Sai City will all fall out with each other. Maybe this is what you want to see, right? Shinichi Miyamoto was expressionless, but his eyes narrowed. I didn't know there was such a person in Zhongzhou State. I didn't know before either. According to my employer, he only appeared recently. He's just a young ant. Evil smiled and said calmly. Shinichi Miyamoto's patience was wearing thin, and his eyes were getting colder and colder. He did not have any friendship with Evil. It was inexplicable that Evil came to him. Moreover, Evil was a young nonentity that had just appeared, but it was related to the balance of the superpowers in Zhongzhou State. Could it be more ridiculous? And even if there was such a person, how could Evil find him? It was illogical. Are you done? Shinichi Miyamoto frowned and said slowly. Don't think what I said is absurd. You should think about it. The person I'm going to kill is a nonentity, but the person behind him is not to be underestimated. Even I don't have the confidence to escape unscathed if I act alone. Miyamoto, the reason why I found you is not only to invite you to Zhongzhou State, but also to cooperate with Tianhai Wuji and Luxing Sangchuan through you. There's also an invincible realm expert, and even a murderous weapon to cooperate with us. 5 invincible realm experts, and a murderous weapon. Do you think it's a joke? Evil said calmly. The reason why I found you is that I like your ninjutsu. But what I value more is that the 2 invincible realm experts in East Island are in Zhongzhou State now. If this cooperation is successful, it's definitely a win-win situation. If it fails, we'll be doomed eternally. I can guarantee the authenticity of every word I say with everything I have. It depends on whether your Empire of East Island dares to gamble for the fate of the country. Of course we dare. Shinichi Miyamoto sneered. But why do I think you dare to gamble for such a dangerous plan? Evil sighed softly and said leisurely. Anyone will go crazy for a reward of $10 billion, right? Maybe I can retire completely after what I did last night. $10 billion. Shinichi Miyamoto's heart shook fiercely. If what Tribulation said was true, it was enough to prove that the person he killed on this trip was really not a small matter. And how could a force that could pay $10 billion to kill a person be ordinary? A young nonentity, who was related to the overall situation of Zhongzhou State? Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said calmly, who is this person? The new young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlan. Evil was silent for a while and chuckled. The wind and thunder veins with unlimited potential. If I can end my last assassination with his blood and life, it will be perfect. The new young heavenly son? Li Tianlan? Wind and thunder veins? Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes twitched slightly. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the information brought by Songxia Ying and Zhuoha Hengxin. Wang Shengshao appeared in Chiu District. Gu Hanshan appeared in the central area. He appeared in Shinjuku District. He narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured to himself, can it really be such a coincidence? P.S. Well, I have to brace myself and tell you something. As the new year approaches, I'm really a little busy, so I have an idea. Last night, I told the readers in the group that during the new year, I will update once a day, which is a normal update. After the new year, I will update twice a day. Can the heroes and heroines accept this? Things are different now. Before I got married, my parents could understand my writing work. But now that I have a wife and a child, things are really different. So, that's why. This year, I really want to spend time with my family. Since I started my new book, I even have less time to sleep with my wife. I should spend time with my family before the new year, and pay my New Year's greetings a few days later. I can probably update on the 5th. Chapter 146. Heavy rain poured over Dongdu. Ninghu, a few hundred kilometers away from Dongdu, had a sunny day. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Li Tianlan, who was dressed in sportswear and had become a young mute again, pulled an excessively large suitcase and walked slowly on the clean and tidy road of Ninghu. He looked like a young man traveling alone. He was ordinary and did not attract any attention along the way. The warm sunshine in the morning quietly sprinkled all over the city, making it warm and comfortable. Li Tianlan, who had abandoned the temporary car 20 kilometers away from Ninghu, walked aimlessly. When he passed by a hotel that did not look high-end but was very clean and exquisite, he stopped, thought about it, and finally walked into the hall. After checking in, he dragged his luggage upstairs. Because he had a fake but extremely realistic fake identity and a lot of yen to clear the way, although he played the role of a mute, the whole process was extremely simple and smooth, without any accident. Li Tianlan's economic suite was on the 3rd floor, a height that would not embarrass him no matter what happened. The East Island-style suite space was ordinary, but it was extremely clean and elegant. The only drawback was that it was close to the block. Although the sound insulation was good, the outside world still seemed to be a little noisy. But Li Tianlan was very satisfied with the current environment. After a fierce battle, what he needed most now was to rest from Dongdu, where it was raining cats and dogs, to the sunny Ninghu. At 9 o'clock in the morning, if there was no accident, he could sleep until dinner time, and even enjoy the world-famous Ninghu beef, and then continue to carry out hunting tasks in the dark and windy night. Throwing the suitcase aside, Li Tianlan sat on the tatami with a calm expression and took out a list again. On the list for names Sanluan Tengjing, Miyamoto Shinyai, Takeda Akino, and Nakamura Akame had been drawn with a horizontal line. For Li Tianlan, it was a sign that the 4 people were dead. The remaining 26 people were his next hunting targets. Among the 4 lists that had been completed, Sanluan Tengjing and Miyamoto Shinyai could be said to be the targets that Li Tianlan deliberately went to hunt, while the remaining 2 were unexpected surprises. They were both killed by him when he rushed into the headquarters on Takeshita Street. Both of them were in the ordinary fire-flaming realm, but their positions were important. One was in charge of logistics, and the other was in charge of intelligence, so it didn't take much effort to kill them. With the death of these 4 people, the government of East Island's plan to take over all the forces of Night Spirit in East Island would undoubtedly be thwarted. Many people might not realize anything now, but as the hunting continued with the advancement of the 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State, the whole East Island would realize what kind of people they were hunting. At that time, not to mention whether someone would actively fight for the positions left by Night Spirit. Even some people in the headquarters of Night Spirit, who didn't want to be incorporated and lose their autonomy, might have some other thoughts. Light a cigarette. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, put aside the matter of Dongdu, and began to study the list in front of him. In Ninghu, Li Tianlan was in charge of hunting for 3 people, and the most important one was Debian Xiangyuan. Unlike the people of the Dark World, and the personnel that the East Island government temporarily sent to take over Night Spirit after the destruction of Night Spirit, Debian Xiangyuan had always been an important figure in Night Spirit, and he was also a very famous figure in East Island and even the world. Of course, Debian Xiangyuan's fame was limited to some specific fields, such as genetics and biology. He was one of the most famous doctors in genetics and biology in the world. On the list in Li Tianlan's hand, Debian Xiangyuan's strength was ordinary. In terms of the difficulty of assassination, it was not more difficult than killing Miyamoto Shinyai, but the credits awarded by the Sky Academy were 200 more than Miyamoto Shinyai, which showed how valuable the head of this top doctor was. Li Tianlan silently stared at the name of Debian Xiangyuan. After a long time, he unfolded the map of Ninghu that he took in the hotel and determined the location of this action. Sensoji in the western suburbs of Ninghu. This was the address given in the information given by Han Shixuan. It was very detailed, but also very vague. This ancient temple with a long history in Ninghu was the secret research institute presided over by Debian Xiangyuan, but there was no mention of this research institute in the information. Sensoji was the only clue about Debian Xiangyuan. A cigarette was about to burn out. Li Tianlan's fingers gently tapped on the map, without saying a word. Sensoji was about 50 kilometers away from the urban area of Ninghu. Judging from Li Tianlan's current location, there were at least a dozen roads leading to the destination. The traffic was very convenient, which also meant that Li Tianlan would not have too big a problem to retreat after he succeeded. But the biggest problem now was not how to retreat, but how to enter the Biological Research Institute under Sensoji that he did not even know the name of. Li Tianlan looked at his watch and hesitated. He did not know if he should go to Sensoji first. Sensoji in Ninghu was one of the tourist attractions. If he went there during the day, even if he could gain something, it would be extremely limited. He pinched out the cigarette but gave up the idea of going to Sensoji. He lay on the tatami and closed his eyes to rest. When he was half asleep, the phone in the suite rang. Li Tianlan frowned, turned over and continued to sleep. Time flew by in a trance. About an hour later, the sound of knocking on the door suddenly came from outside the door. The rhythm was very light, and it sounded a little cautious. Li Tianlan, who slept very lightly but deeply, opened his eyes immediately. The Silver Human Emperor had slipped out of his cuff. Li Tianlan was expressionless. When he was about to ask who it was, he suddenly realized that he was now a mute. He narrowed his eyes slightly, stood up quietly, walked to the door and opened it. An East Island girl, who looked about 27 or 28 years old, stood in front of the door and looked at Li Tianlan. She blushed and seemed to be a little nervous. This was a woman who could be regarded as extremely beautiful in most people's eyes. Her hair was dyed a very simple and elegant gray, and the outline of her face was soft and charming. She wore a tight waist shirt, which completely showed off her slender waist and plump chest. She wore a short skirt, seductive mesh stockings on her tender white thighs, and a pair of black stilettos on her feet. A faint fragrance floated into Li Tianlan's nostrils. The woman's small hand was holding a delicate and simple lady's bag, and she whispered, "Is this the service you ordered?" It was a very soft and coquettish Japanese, which sounded a little sweet and charming. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. He couldn't speak, so he just shook his head coldly and was about to close the door. "Please wait a minute." The woman's face seemed to be a little panicked. She stretched out an arm to stop Li Tianlan, bit her lip and whispered, "Sir, I'm very clean, and I'm a wife. My skills are very good, and I can definitely make you happy. If you're not satisfied with me, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly, suddenly opened the door a little, and motioned for her to come in. The woman was stunned again, and subconsciously looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan pointed to his mouth, indicating that he couldn't speak, and stood in the door to make way for her. The woman hesitated a little, held the lady's bag in her hand, and stepped into the bedroom with a fragrant wind in her high heels. The woman entered the room, put the bag aside, turned around, bit her lip, looked at Li Tianlan, and said softly and obediently, "Shall we start now?" Her face was flushed, and she looked anxious and shy. "I can use my mouth first." "I'd better take off my clothes first." Li Tianlan nodded with a calm expression. The woman seemed to be a little shy. She turned around and bowed her head to unbutton her shirt. Her long hair hung down, revealing a section of her tender white neck, which looked extremely attractive. Li Tianlan walked over and gently stroked her neck. The woman's body stiffened, and her face became redder. Her palms, which were unbuttoning, trembled slightly. "Nice appearance, but you have killing intent." Li Tianlan's voice suddenly sounded in the quiet room, where only the woman's rapid breathing was left, and he spoke in perfect Chinese. Before he finished his words, the face of the woman, who bowed her head to unbutton her shirt, had changed dramatically. As soon as Li Tianlan said nice, she suddenly turned around. In an instant, Li Tianlan's palm pressed against her neck, but he caught nothing. The third button on the woman's shirt was unbuttoned. She reached out with both hands, and had taken out 2 daggers glowing with a strange green light. "Turn around." Li Tianlan had just finished his words. Both of them were extremely fast. The moment the woman turned around, the human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand had slightly wrapped around her body. It was not a spear or a sword. The slender spearhead stuck out the metal copper. The human emperor directly turned into a dagger. The human emperor thrust. Swish. Before the woman's figure with the 2 knives in her hands stabilized, the human emperor thrust had been fiercely stabbed into the woman's abdomen. Li Tianlan's expression was cold, and the human emperor turned slightly. Crack. In the crisp sound of metal, the human emperor thrust trembled slightly, and the blades on both sides of the spearhead stretched directly into the woman's body. Li Tianlan's hands were always stable, and his eyes were fierce and cold. In an instant he directly pulled out the dagger. In an instant, there was a huge strange-shaped hole in the woman's abdomen, and blood gushed out of her mouth. She stared at Li Tianlan with a pair of eyes that were originally soft and affectionate, but now full of ferocity, and said, You have too many doubts." Li Tianlan said flatly, "I told you you have killing intent." He raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at the woman in front of him, and asked, "Do you know the Heavenly King Heart?" The woman's eyes were full of understanding. She took a deep breath, let the blood gush out of her body, and pounced on him without hesitation. The fire in the room instantly bloomed, but it was not a blazing orange, but a very strange kind of pale green. Her body swelled up rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, she seemed to be several times bigger. In the expanding body, there was a muffled sound in her body, and the whole person exploded in an instant. The pale green flame was completely out of control in an instant, madly devouring everything in the room. Countless green juice burst out of the woman's body, completely enveloping Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's body shook. Countless green juice passed through his body, but Li Tianlan's real body had already appeared behind the woman. He pulled up the large suitcase in the room that contained the sky attack. Without hesitation, he strode a few steps, broke the window, and jumped directly from the third floor. In a messy sound of breaking, Li Tianlan dragged the suitcase to the ground with countless broken glass. Behind him, the green flame with strange light and shadow had spread and burned all over the third floor. Li Tianlan straightened up and began to run without looking back. He carried a huge suitcase, supported himself with one hand, stepped over the roadside railing, and rose into the air. A silver-white Lexus drove across the road in an instant. Li Tianlan stomped hard on the roof of the Lexus. Shadow formula transposition. In the next second, Li Tianlan had already appeared on the other side of the road. He carried the suitcase and left the scene at full speed without stopping, until his figure appeared on the other side of the street, around the hotel. Some figures that seemed to stay nearby unintentionally suddenly came to their senses. Chase. In a subconscious silence, a cold and resolute voice suddenly sounded. At the main entrance of the hotel, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes, who looked like a business elite, tore off his suit jacket. His figure flashed, and almost in the blink of an eye, he crossed the whole block and chased after Li Tianlan. In the full sprint, he took out a walkie-talkie and said quickly to the other end of the walkie-talkie, "Target confirmed. Blue sportswear, carrying a large suitcase, silver hair. All teams pay attention to interception and block this block." He paused and sped up again, saying, "Get the helicopter." Li Tianlan carried the large suitcase and walked like the wind, constantly changing positions with the shadow formula. In a few minutes, he was getting farther and farther away from the pursuers behind him. But he didn't relax at all. Instead, he became more and more serious. East Island, at this moment, he realized that he still underestimated the power of the East Island Special Warfare System. From Dongdu to Ninghu, a distance of hundreds of kilometers. In less than 12 hours, the East Island Special Warfare System had already locked his position. Needless to say, now that he was running away, Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan must be in a bad situation. It was really not so easy to fight with the special warfare system of a country. To put it simply, after the initial hunting, they were exposed. The street was full of people. Li Tianlan quickly passed through a block. Vaguely, there seemed to be more and more figures blocking his way. They passed through from all directions, and in a very short time, they seemed to have surrounded Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold. He held the human emperor tightly in his hand, and was about to fight his way out. In his ears, the roar of a car engine had sounded quickly. A black Mercedes-Benz rushed over in an almost reckless manner, knocking down 2 East Island residents on the side of the road, and finally stopped in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Chapter 147. Get in the car. I can help you. Li Tianlan instinctively froze for a moment. The woman in the back row of the Mercedes-Benz looked about 26 or 27 years old. Her face was charming and soft, and her whole body was full of a mature and intellectual dignity. The streets of Ninghu were already in chaos. Countless elites of the special warfare system of East Island were rushing over from different directions, and some of them even took out weapons. But the woman in the car was always calm and looked at Li Tianlan with extremely sincere eyes. The woman's voice was soft and sweet, but the sweet Japanese fell into Li Tianlan's ears, and after being translated into Chinese, it became a mechanical and rigid tone. She was from East Island. This was the first thought that came to Li Tianlan's mind. In the chaotic street, inside and outside the car, the two people looked at each other. The next second, without any hesitation, Li Tianlan opened the door and sat in the car. The black Mercedes-Benz roared, and the sudden speed made Li Tianlan's body stick to the seat behind him. The whole car seemed to fly in an instant, and the ground of the car seemed to be lowering. The scenery on both sides of the window kept going backward and became blurred. Vaguely, Li Tianlan saw through the dashboard that the speed of the Mercedes-Benz had exceeded 150 miles per hour in just a few seconds. As a bumpkin who knew nothing about cars dozens of days ago, Li Tianlan couldn't imagine what kind of violent modification this car had gone through to have the performance that was even more exaggerated than most supercars. The Mercedes-Benz dashed left and right in the traffic on Ninghu Street. The performance of the car was good, and the driver was obviously a professional. Li Tianlan only felt that the car kept swaying on the street, and the huge car shuttled through the gaps in the traffic in a very dexterous manner. In just a few minutes, Li Tianlan had been farther and farther away from the place where he had just been besieged. The scene outside the window was still going backward quickly. Li Tianlan looked at the dashboard in front of him. The speed was 302. Damn it, this speed is almost like flying. The scene on the street gradually changed from noisy to quiet. Along the clean road, the Mercedes-Benz continued to move forward. The woman, who hadn't taken the initiative to speak since Li Tianlan got in the car, finally turned her head, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trust, Mr. Li. You made the best choice." Li Tianlan glanced at the woman and said nothing. Trust? This was complete nonsense. The reason why Li Tianlan dared to get in the car was that he could be sure that even if the worst happened, he could still escape. The car sped along the way, but neither the driver nor the woman beside him noticed that as the car continued to accelerate, there was always a patch of crystal clear, and even water following the Mercedes-Benz. After entering the ice-condensing realm, Xuehua was Li Tianlan's shadow. As long as there was any danger, Xuehua would turn into his shadow and switch places with Li Tianlan. The whole process didn't even take a second. If he hadn't had great confidence in his own safety, he wouldn't have easily trusted the woman beside him whom he had never met, even if he had fought his way out. Let me introduce myself. My name is Shitian Mingzi. Mr. Li can call me Mingzi. The woman smiled gently and reached out a small hand to Li Tianlan. I don't think I need to introduce myself. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and shook Shitian Mingzi's hand. She called him Mr. Li as soon as she opened her mouth. It seemed meaningless whether he introduced himself or not. Of course. Shitian Mingzi's eyes were coquettish, and there was a kind of obvious fanaticism and worship in them. It was a kind of charming look that people knew was fake, but it could make people believe it. The third young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlan of Sai City. Almost everyone in East Island who should know about your current identity already knows about it. Of course, that includes our Shitian clan. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly sank, but he didn't show any panicked expression. At times like this, he had to be calm. He calmly glanced at Shitian Mingzi and said with a smile, "You moved fast enough." "It's not difficult," Shitian Mingzi said indifferently. "After all, this is East Island. I can only say that we didn't expect Zhongzhou State to have such a big plan. If I'm not mistaken, you three young heavenly sons are only part of it. Zhongzhou State, there should be a large part of the elites that have secretly sneaked into East Island, right? So the chaos in Zhongzhou State that the Dark World cares about, and the challenge of the Lord of Samsara City to the God of War of Zhongzhou State, is just a hoax, right?" Li Tianlan was expressionless and said nothing. He didn't know much about this kind of thing. Even if he knew all about it, he had no comment. "Mr. Li," Shitian Mingzi frowned. Her frown was very subtle, which made her look more delicate and charming. "This problem is very important to Shitian clan, so please tell us the truth." She sat in the car, bowed deeply, and said softly and respectfully, "Please. In return, I will tell you of very important news. Believe me, this news is very important to you." Shitian clan? Li Tianlan heard the surname again, and felt it was more and more familiar. He frowned thoughtfully. "My father is Shitianingji," Shitian Mingzi said softly. Shitianingji. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly became enlightened. He had indeed heard of this clan and this name. Before the hunting operation began, Han Shishuan emphasized on introducing this name. The name Shitian clan in Han Shishuan's mouth was Shitian Financial Group. It was one of the youngest consortiums in East Island, and the largest ATM of Night Spirit in East Island. With the destruction of Night Spirit, the logistics department of the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance of East Island had sent officials to Shitian Financial Group and were negotiating with Shitian Ingji. This was all the information Li Tianlan got. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered. If the identity of Shitian Mingzi was true, then there was no doubt that East Island, the youngest world-class consortium, had been a little restless after the destruction of Night Spirit. At least, they were not willing to accept the status quo that the consortium was controlled by the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance. That was why Shitian Mingzi contacted him. Is the situation in Zhongzhou State so important to Shitian clan? Li Tianlan smiled. So what if that battle is true? So what if it's false? Shitian Mingzi gently bit her pink and tender lips. In the case of asking for help, she had no initiative at all. She could only lower her eyes and say, after this battle, if the master of Samsara Palace is safe and sound, Shitian Financial Group is willing to provide economic support for Samsara. Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head and looked at Shitian Mingzi with burning eyes. Shitian Mingzi also looked at him with a firm look. Shitian Financial Group provided economic support for Samsara. What did this mean? Treason? Li Tianlan looked at the woman beside him for a full minute, then slightly raised his eyebrows and said, in fact, long before the destruction of Night Spirit, my father had begun to apply for Swiss citizenship. We just left Night Spirit, not treason. For many years, Night Spirit has been trying to get out of the control of the East Island government. His Highness Tianxin moving the headquarters to Billy State is a good example. Night Spirit and East Island seem to be in harmony, but the fight in the dark is extremely cruel. Shitian Mingzi whispered. Li Tianlan's eyes had narrowed tightly. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped some of the core veins of Zhongzhou State's plot. But the idea flashed in his mind, and then it became untraceable. Go on. His body leaned against the seat, and he said calmly, after the destruction of Night Spirit, from the perspective of the cabinet, the first thing they want to get is Shitian Financial Group. At present, the negotiation between the government and the family is still going on. If there is no accident, the government will buy nearly 50% of the shares of Shitian Financial Group at a very low price and become the first shareholder of the consortium. Everything of Shitian clan will shrink countless times. My father has been serving Night Spirit in recent years, and in the secret game between Night Spirit and East Island for many years, my father has offended a lot of people. Once the control of Shitian Financial Group falls into the hands of the government will definitely be happy for other forces to hit Shitian Financial Group when it is down. At that time, what awaits us will be a disaster, Shitian Mingzi whispered. So we are willing to choose Samsara. Samsara Palace is a force that has just risen in the dark world in recent years, but the palace master is a real super expert and the boss most worthy of our service. If the battle between Her Highness and the God of War of Zhongzhou State is false, then it is true that Samsara and Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island. In other words, Samsara is also one of the super forces in the dark world that least needs to care about East Island. Such a force is most likely to be willing to accept Shitian Financial Group. Li Tianlan was silent. After a long time, he looked out of the window and said calmly, "You made the right choice." He couldn't fully trust Shitian Mingzi now, but it didn't matter to give her some signals that were irrelevant to the overall situation. Shitian Mingzi's eyes lit up slightly, and she keenly grasped the information contained in Li Tianlan's words. She bowed deeply again and said seriously, "Thank you, Mr. Li." She paused and said again, "We know that you have a very close relationship with Boss Qin of Samsara. If you can, I hope you can help Shitian Financial Group to reach a cooperation with Samsara. Please." Li Tianlan didn't say anything but chuckled and said, "Miss Mingzi, I remember you just said that you would tell me a very important news for me." "Yes." Shitian Mingzi's face tightened subconsciously. She took a deep breath and lowered her voice saying, "Tianlan, you must be careful in the next action. At present, the Divine Wind Force has all gone down the Holy Mountain and is tracking down all the infiltrators from Zhongzhou State to East Island. You Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan are the top priority of the Divine Wind Force. Your assassination target is too obvious. Combining some of the dead people, Some people have concluded that Zhongzhou State wants to attack everything left by Night Spirit in East Island. Unfortunately, the Divine Wind Force has already made targeted arrangements for these situations. She took a deep breath, and her plump chest swelled slightly. The invincible realm expert in East Island, Supreme Ninja Shinichi Miyamoto, even suggested the Mikado and the Prime Minister to directly wake up the Kusanagi force, but they refused. But I have a really reliable news that His Highness Shinichi Miyamoto is likely to personally carry out the obliteration plan this time. The 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State are all on his obliteration list, and you, if the intelligence is correct, you should be the first on His Highness Miyamoto's obliteration list. An invincible realm expert personally carried out the obliteration operation? Li Tianlan subconsciously tightened his body, and his expression was solemn. Tianlan, if I'm not mistaken, you came to Ninghu to attack Sensodera, right? Shi Tianmingzi sighed softly and continued. I don't know if your country's intelligence infiltration is not thorough, or if there are other reasons. I just want to say that if you act alone in Sensodera, you will almost certainly die. You should have a list in your hand, right? If the person who gave you this list knew a little about Sensodera, he would not have let you carry out this action. She paused and said calmly, the other party obviously doesn't intend to let you go back alive. Li Tianlan smiled, but subconsciously clenched his hands. The one who gave him this hunting list, it was Yi Fengcheng, the general of the Southeast Group. Is there anything special about Sensodera? Li Tianlan asked. Chapter 148. Unlike Sensoji in Dongdatai District, Sensoji on the outskirts of Ninghu was a real small temple. As one of the tourist attractions of Ninghu, Sensoji was bustling during the day, but at night, the whole area around Sensoji looked extremely cold. At 12 o'clock in the evening, a convoy of 6 Toyotas slowly approached the gate of Sensoji. None of the 6 cars turned on the lights, but they moved slowly in the faint light of the daytime running lights. They moved very slowly and looked a little sneaky. In the back row of the Toyota in the middle of the convoy, Li Tianlan sat quietly and looked at the gate of Sensoji getting closer and closer. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes flashed with cold light. The Underground Research Institute of Sensoji could be said to be the most important hunting target of his trip to Ninghu. But to be honest, at the beginning, Li Tianlan did not pay much attention to Sensoji. His current realm could be said to stay in the stabilization phase of the fire-flaming realm. Although there was a big realm that was promoted by drugs, it was a little superficial. But in terms of real combat capability, he had the wind and thunder veins, the chi-controlling realm of the pseudo-invincible realm, the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, the unique skill of the Li family. With so many unique conditions accumulated on him, his current combat capability could absolutely exceed everyone's expectations. Under the invincible realm, he might not be able to beat some experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, but it was not difficult for him to leave. He came to Sensoji to assassinate an internationally renowned ordinary scholar. Even if the Underground Research Institute of Sensoji was heavily guarded, it would not be more difficult than assassinating Miyamoto Shiny Eye. At worst, he could kill Dubian Xiangyuan and leave. The other 2 relatively unimportant targets could be killed in the future. But after getting the news from Shi Tianmingzi, Li Tianlan realized that Sensoji was definitely not a simple place. According to Shi Tianmingzi, coming to Sensoji this time was tantamount to stepping into a trap that would surely kill him. But killing Dubian Xiangyuan was not the most difficult task on his hunting list. Was it because the intelligence of Zhongzhou State was not in place? Or did Yi Fengcheng really have other plans? Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and his eyes looking out of the window became deeper and deeper. He did not have much contact with Yi Fengcheng in the Sky Academy, or even very little. But from the bottom of his heart, Li Tianlan did not have a bad impression of the frivolous and unruly middle-aged man. If he knew the situation of Sensoji and deliberately assigned this hunting target to him, it was simply his intention to kill enemies or leaders and teachers. Li Tianlan was a little tired. The national plan should have been a situation of unity among all parties in Zhongzhou State. In this situation, if someone really had ulterior motives, It was absolutely a very disgusting thing. So after hearing Shi Tianmingzi's description of Sensodera, Li Tianlan had a rage in his heart that seemed to be about to burst out for a whole day. The Research Institute underground of Sensoji was codenamed Black Sunday. Its total area was not large. The upper and lower floors added up to an area of less than 10,000 square meters. However, the interior of the Research Institute used countless special alloys. A large number of offensive weapons were hidden in each key corridor. From the entrance to the core area of the Research Institute, there were nearly 30 alloy gates with a thickness of 3 to 5 meters. All of them required passwords, fingerprints, and pupil verification. Under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan would be trapped inside if he could not even pass the first gate. What's more, according to Shi Tianmingzi, there was a small group of Kusanagi force in the Research Institute. Shi Tianmingzi was vague about the Kusanagi force. She didn't mean to hide it, but she didn't know much about this top-secret force in East Island. She only said a few words and some speculations. It was extremely confusing, but Li Tianlan understood one sentence. Shi Tianmingzi said that the Kusanagi force was a truly invincible team. A closed space, an invincible team, and many obstacles. This was simply an impossible hunting operation. If Shi Tianmingzi or the Shi Tian Financial Group hadn't appeared, he might have been trapped in the Black Sun Institute now. Li Tianlan silently lit a cigarette, and the sharpness of his body grew colder. Tianlan, are you sure you want me to enter the Black Sun Institute with you? In the car, Shi Tianmingzi's serious and cold voice sounded. The charm on the face of the wealthy daughter of the Shi Tian family had completely disappeared, and her eyes looking at Li Tianlan were full of seriousness and coldness. You don't dare? Li Tianlan asked calmly. As he spoke, the smoke of the cigarette wantonly drifted to Shi Tianmingzi's face. It's not that I don't dare. Shi Tianmingzi shook her head calmly. It's just that it's not necessary. You've already gotten the reset password of the Research Institute. The Black Sun Research Institute is basically defenseless to you now. My strength is not high. If I act with you, if anything happens, I'm likely to be a burden to you. I still insist on my opinion. Maybe it's the right choice for me to stay here to support you, if you trust me. I'm sorry. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Shi Tianmingzi's graceful face. He said with a faint smile, I can't trust you. I did get the reset password of the Institute, but I can't guarantee that you don't have another password with higher authority. He waved his hand and said expressionlessly, I believe in the sincerity of the Shi Tian Financial Group, and you have a good reason to turn to samsara, but I can't trust you. You can think of it as me being timid and afraid of death, but you must enter the Black Sun Institute with me. This is not timidity. Shi Tianmingzi frowned and whispered. You are too suspicious. Li Tianlan smoked the cigarette and remained calm. What if I insist on my opinion and stay here? Shi Tianmingzi looked at Li Tianlan quietly and suddenly asked. Li Tianlan stopped smoking, turned around, and looked at Shi Tianmingzi. The two looked at each other in silence, and the atmosphere in the carriage suddenly became a little depressed. After a long time, Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said faintly, I can't let anyone who may control my life and death escape from my control, even if the possibility is low. So if I insist on staying here, I will kill all of you and then enter the Black Sun Institute by myself. You may have the password in your hand, or you may not. You may harm me or you may not. But as long as you are dead, all these possibilities will not exist. The atmosphere froze in an instant. Shi Tianmingzi even had a feeling that she couldn't breathe in an instant. Until Li Tianlan's cigarette burned out. She took a deep breath and said coldly, Tianlan, Shi Tian Financial Group is not malicious to you. The reset password in your hand is indeed the highest authority. We will not harm you. Aren't you afraid of killing the wrong person? If Shi Tian clan can prove its position afterward, I will apologize to you for my actions. Li Tianlan said. Apologize? What was the use of apologizing when he was dead? Shi Tianmingzi bit her lip. In her sight, through the dim light, Li Tianlan's face was clear and blurry. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and there seemed to be infinite determination and indifference. Shi Tianmingzi suddenly thought of an old saying of Zhongzhou state. I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me. The motorcade stopped less than 100 meters away from Sensoji Temple. The headlights were completely out. Li Tianlan threw the cigarette butt out of the car, looked at Shi Tianmingzi, and said with a smile, "Are you coming with me?" He knew the sincerity of the Shitian clan. At present, Shi Tianmingzi, the controller of the Shitian Financial Group, had been secretly placed under house arrest by the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance in Dongdu. Shi Tianmingzi's brother was also on the house arrest list. Of course, this kind of house arrest was not compulsory, and nothing could be seen on the surface. Shi Tianmingzi was able to evade the heavy attention and successfully contact Li Tianlan with nearly 20 family elites. She also announced her position and leaked some secret information. From this point of view, there was no problem for the Shitian clan to have the intention to turn to samsara. But Li Tianlan did not dare to gamble, and he could not gamble. He had borne too much, so once anything that threatened him appeared, he would not hesitate to extinguish it at all costs. Yes. Shi Tianmingzi glanced at Li Tianlan and finally bowed, her tone soft. In the night, the two got out of the car at the same time, and quickly rushed to Sensoji Temple 100 meters away under the hazy moonlight. The small wooden door of the temple was closed tightly. Li Tianlan and Shi Tianmingzi jumped over the wall and entered silently. Shi Tianmingzi made a gesture to Li Tianlan, indicating that they should act separately. At this point, Li Tianlan was not afraid that Shi Tianmingzi would escape. He nodded slightly and went straight to the small courtyard of the abbot in the intelligence. Sensoji Temple was not big, and there were only 3 monks in the whole temple. The abbot was in the fire-flaming realm, and the 2 apprentices had just entered the ice-condensing realm. This was the guard force of the Black Sun Institute on the ground. It was not small, but in Li Tianlan's eyes it was not big. The small courtyard of the abbot was located at the back of the temple. As soon as Li Tianlan stepped into the courtyard, a bright Taoist light had already spilled out. In the knife light, there was a very sharp cry. "Who?" Li Tianlan dodged the knife light. He didn't bother to say a word, and the silver swords lit up in an instant. In the bright knife light, a little flame had just risen and disappeared. Li Tianlan's figure had appeared outside the courtyard, and went straight to the central hall. The entrance switch of the Black Sun Institute was located at the 3rd knuckle of the left hand of the Buddha statue in the hall. When Li Tianlan opened the mechanism, Shi Tianmingzi's figure just appeared in the hall. The floor in front of Li Tianlan was separated, and an entrance of about 2 meters appeared directly in front of the two. The passage behind the entrance extended all the way down, and the light was soft and bright. Li Tianlan looked at Shi Tianmingzi calmly and said calmly, "Go down." Shi Tianmingzi's eyes were complicated. She gritted her teeth and walked directly into the passage. Li Tianlan followed closely and entered the passage. They had just walked less than 10 meters when the cracked floor behind them had automatically closed. The internal switch is in lab number 1. Tianlan, reset the password now. Shi Tianmingzi said softly. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the Black Sun Institute in front of him. What appeared in front of them was a corridor with a metallic luster. The rooms in the corridor were juxtaposed, looking solemn and awe-inspiring. The metal walls reflected a soft luster. Being in it, everything around them seemed to be brighter than ever. Li Tianlan took out something like a remote control from his pocket and pressed a series of numbers. Crack! In the Black Sun Institute, the sound of metal crashing sounded. The light in the institute dimmed for a moment, and then it was bright again. Shi Tianmingzi led the way in front, pressed the elevator that went straight to the 2nd floor downstairs, and strolled leisurely. The Black Sun Institute was an important part of the Night Spirit organization. Shitian Financial Group was also an important part of Night Spirit. And the best thing was that Shitian Financial Group was a very famous technology consortium in the whole East Island, and even the whole Asia. In other words, a large number of alloys and all kinds of exquisite designs in the Black Sun Institute were made by Shitian Financial Group. Some of the weapons inside were also put in by Shitian Financial Group. As for the reset password in Li Tianlan's hand, it was set a long time ago. It was a task personally assigned by Tian Xian, one of the dominators of Night Spirit. From this, It could be seen how fierce the battle between Night Spirit and the East Island government had been over the years. With this reset password, everything in the Black Sun Institute was equivalent to nothing to Li Tianlan. If Li Tianlan hadn't met Shi Tianmingzi today, even if he rushed here, he would probably be trapped to death. The elevator went from the first floor to the second floor. Shi Tianmingzi looked calm and led the way first. The environment on the second floor was the same as on the first floor, but there were fewer rooms. There was a sense of precision science fiction everywhere. Shi Tianmingzi took Li Tianlan to an alloy door in the central area, turned to look at Li Tianlan, and said in a serious tone, "Tianlan, remember, kill in one blow. Kill in one blow." These 4 words were even directly related to the success or failure of their trip. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at the alloy door in front of him. Without hesitation, he kicked it out directly. Boom! The whole floor seemed to be shaking, and the alloy door was kicked open under the tremendous force. The 2 swords in Li Tianlan's hands were dazzling, and his whole body had quickly rushed into the number 1 laboratory of the Black Sun Institute. Shi Tianmingzi followed closely behind. "Who is it?" A roar of shock and anger suddenly sounded. In Shi Tianmingzi's sight, the whole laboratory was instantly filled with a large area of bright lightning. A middle-aged man in a kimono, with lightning all over his body, had stopped Li Tianlan at the first time. Behind the middle-aged man, an old man in a research suit quickly retreated after a slight daze. Boom! Li Tianlan and the middle-aged man fought in an instant. Under the full blow, Li Tianlan retreated a few steps, while the middle-aged man was directly blown out. "Doctor! Hurry up!" The middle-aged man spat out blood and shouted with horror in his eyes. There was no need for him to speak at all. The old man, who kept retreating, had already opened his mouth to speak. Dongdu, Pegasus, Beihai, Divine Wind, Setting Sun. Words came out of the old man's mouth one by one. Crack! In the corner of the laboratory, the 3 statues that originally stood side by side began to shake in an instant, and countless dense cracks began to appear on the statues. Loyalty, fearlessness, blood, invincibility. Shi Tianmingzi's expression changed dramatically. Chapter 149. In the new year, I wish everyone a happy new year. May all your wishes come true. Well, nothing is better than the words, "All your wishes come true. All your wishes come true. All your wishes come true." Li Tianlan didn't know what was going on, but the moment Debian Xiangyuan stepped back and spat out the words, he had already noticed that something was wrong. The words were completely inexplicable when translated into Chinese. The pronunciation in Japanese was indescribably weird. The old tone kept echoing in the research institute. Li Tianlan instinctively sensed an extremely dangerous and strange aura. Flying fire, quicksand, polar bear, trample. The old tone sounded in a hurry and without interruption. Without hesitation, Li Tianlan rushed straight to Debian Xiangyuan. One advanced and the other retreated. The distance of more than 20 meters between them was instantly shortened. The human emperor sword shone, and the surging sword intent gathered in front of Debian Xiangyuan, completely enveloping him in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Debian Xiangyuan's whole body was filled with bright electric light. The electric light and the sword qi intertwined quickly in front of Debian Xiangyuan. The old scholar's body was already covered in blood, and the red blood splashed on his white research uniform. It was a shocking sight. The thunder-shocking realm expert who was defeated by Li Tianlan in a very short time had desperately rushed toward Li Tianlan. The lightning on his body was flashing intensely, and the whole research room had turned into a dazzling and deep light blue. The lightning passed through Li Tianlan's body, but it did not attack him. Instead, it built layers of defense in front of Debian Xiangyuan. The sword light became sharper. The lightning became more dazzling. The two intertwined with each other, and the sharp sword intent tore everything apart. But time passed quickly. Missing fish and shrimp, floating light youth. Debian Xiangyuan kept stepping back, and his eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan, but it was not a kind of anger and disgust for the intruder. His eyes were calm but fanatical, with an extremely contradictory expectation. The lightning on his body was getting weaker and weaker, but his tone was getting higher and higher. Billow. Giant wave. Misty rain. Sunset. Boom in the laboratory. The three statues kept shaking with the words, and countless cracks spread all over their bodies. Crack! A large piece of stone skin fell off. Vaguely, the silhouettes of three people appeared in the research institute. Shi Tianmingzi was in a daze, and her face was full of fear and despair. Li Tianlan didn't know what all this meant, but she had already guessed the truth. As the strongest force in East Island, the existence of the Kusanagi force had always been a top secret. If it weren't for some special reasons, the daughter of a top wealthy family like Shi Tianmingzi wouldn't know the existence of the Kusanagi force at all. But even so, she didn't know much about this highly secretive force in East Island. She only vaguely knew that the establishment of the Kusanagi force had an inseparable relationship with Night Spirit and Shitian Financial Group. This was an almost invincible force. Just a few days ago, she got the news again. The Kusanagi force needed to be awakened. Awakening, to put it coldly, was equivalent to activation. The words that Debian Xiangyuan said were probably the activation codes of the Kusanagi force. In the Research Institute, all kinds of lights flickered, and the sharp edge almost filled the entire space, but Shi Tianmingzi's eyes became more and more frightened. The whole plan had a serious accident when they rushed into the laboratory. Normally, the Black Sun Institute could be said to be the most dangerous place on Li Tianlan's hunting list, but after getting the reset password provided by Shi Tianmingzi, it would also become the easiest point. There were a lot of high-tech weapons here, but there were basically no elites guarding here. There were only dozens of scholars and researchers, and a small group of the Kusanagi force. And the Kusanagi force needed to be awakened. So as long as they killed Debian Xiangyuan, who had the complete password, as soon as they rushed into the laboratory, they didn't need to care about the threat of the Kusanagi force at all. That was what Shi Tianmingzi said before they entered the laboratory. But neither she nor Li Tianlan expected that there was a second person in the laboratory besides Debian Xiangyuan. And he was an expert close to the peak of the thundershocking realm. Shi Tianmingzi had seen this middle-aged man. He was one of the top executives in the Divine Wind Force, General Fujiwara Ping. Why did he show up here? Li Tianlan was the young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, but after all, his real realm was only the fire-flaming realm. In the face of an expert close to the peak of the thundershocking realm, even if he could win, he couldn't kill him in seconds. During this period of time, it was enough for Debian Xiangyuan to activate a small team of the Kusanagi force in the laboratory. Fujiwara Ping. This was the biggest variable of this trip. Sunset. As soon as the last word came out, a stiff but extremely loud voice had covered the whole laboratory in an instant, wild and indifferent. In the laboratory, the stone skin of the three statues had completely fallen off, and countless lime fell to the ground. Under the stone skin, three figures, each more than 2 meters tall, took a step forward and said, "The password is correct. Number 9, protect me. Number 7, number 8, kill him." Without hesitation, Debian Xiangyuan pointed at Li Tianlan and gave a direct order. The lightning in front of him had almost been completely twisted and disappeared by the sword light. Blood bloomed from every corner of his body, making him look extremely miserable. Li Tianlan's long sword shook. When he was about to stab Debian Xiangyuan in front of him, Fujiwara Ping behind him had rushed over and clasped his shoulders with both hands. Blood flowed from the corner of the mouth of this high-level member of the Divine Wind Force, and his breath was weak. Just now, protecting Debian Xiangyuan with all his strength seemed to have consumed most of the strength of this thundershocking realm expert. He gasped hard and sneered. "You're dead." Li Tianlan withdrew his long sword and turned around without hesitation to hit him with his elbow. Bang! Fujiwara Ping had already consumed most of his strength, and he barely blocked it. His whole body was suddenly hit and flew out. The sound of bones breaking rang out, accompanied by Fujiwara Ping's miserable groan. One of his arms was obviously broken. Blood came out from Li Tianlan's 2 shoulders. Li Tianlan frowned slightly and looked at the several bloody holes on his shoulders caused by Fujiwara Ping. Before he had time to react, the piercing sound of something breaking through the air suddenly sounded behind him. The Kusanagi force. Li Tianlan had no time to care about Fujiwara Ping. He suddenly turned around, and the moment his body retreated and pulled away, He stabbed straight with his sword. The raging fire flew up on the sword edge. The sword energy surged. In an instant, Li Tianlan seemed to be surrounded by fire. One after another, the long swords condensed from flames floated around him. As he stabbed straight with his sword, countless sword shadows rushed to the two burly figures in front of him at the same time. Charge! Li Tianlan rushed forward. The two figures also rushed forward at the same time. The distance was 5 meters. The two sides instantly got closer. For the first time, Li Tianlan officially saw the Kusanagi force that he had just heard of. Number 7, Number 8, and Number 9. Number 9 was standing beside Dubian Xiangyuan at this time, watching all this coldly and motionlessly. Number 7 and Number 8 were in charge of attacking. Not to mention in East Island, where people were short, even if they were in any place, their figures could be said to be really tough. They were more than 2 meters tall, bald, and their faces without eyebrows and beards, which made their not ugly appearance look extremely weird. What was even weirder was their eyes. They were mechanical and numb, but there was an unparalleled fierce light in them. The muscles all over their bodies bulged as if they were about to explode. Their bodies looked very cumbersome, but they were extremely flexible in their movements. The most important thing was that they seemed to be fearless and ignore everything. The two heavy bodies ran wildly in the laboratory, and the whole ground was trembling slightly. In the face of the blazing fire and sword shadows, Number 7 didn't stop. He opened his hands, and his huge body rushed directly to Li Tianlan against the sword edge. Number 8 jumped up behind Number 7, waved his fists, and directly hit Li Tianlan's head. He was sober, indifferent, crazy, and mechanically stiff. The two of them cooperated tacitly, one in front and the other in the back. The moment Number 8 jumped up, Li Tianlan could only feel the surging power. There was no ice or fire in the air. Number 8 waved his fists, and the air suddenly burst out with a whistling sound that was almost like an explosion. Countless air was compressed together crazily, with an indescribable fierceness from top to bottom. Ding! The blade of the long sword in Li Tianlan's hand was surrounded by fire. He stabbed with all his strength and directly stabbed into the heart of Number 7. The scene of the long sword piercing through the chest and splashing blood did not happen as he had imagined. The long sword pierced through the clothes, but it was like stabbing a steel plate, hard and stable. The opponent's body seemed to be unusually slippery, and most of the fire was extinguished the moment it touched the opponent. Number 7's body suddenly straightened against the blade of the sword. Instead of moving forward, the incomparably sharp human emperor began to bend. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted instantly. Number 8's fist-waving figure had passed Number 7 and whistled down. Li Tianlan's face changed for the first time. His body quickly became illusory, and when he appeared, he was already behind Number 7. Boom! Number 8's body fell to the ground. His joints shook, and a clear sound of metal crashing came from inside. Li Tianlan's shadow had dissipated, and the smoke and dust were flying all over the sky. Number 8's body missed its target, and fell directly to the ground. A big hole with a depth of nearly half a meter was opened. Countless dense cracks spread over, and the whole laboratory shook violently. For the first time, Li Tianlan felt shocked in his heart. Without hesitation, he waved his sword again and stabbed the back of Number 7's head. Watch out! Shi Tianmingzi's scream suddenly sounded. Li Tianlan's heart sank. Before he could do anything else, Number 7 seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. He suddenly turned around and swept his foot at the same time. Crack! The long sword stabbed Number 7's head fiercely. The blade cut through the skin, but it could not go any further. Number 7's face was expressionless, and he kicked Li Tianlan's waist hard. In an instant, Li Tianlan had no time to change positions with the shadow, and he was directly swept out by the powerful kick. His body flew nearly 20 meters away, smashed a large number of precision instruments, and spat out a mouthful of blood. Shi Tianmingzi exclaimed and subconsciously ran to Li Tianlan's side. She murmured desperately, "They have special alloys in their bodies. You can't kill them." This is the Kusanagi force, a perfect combination of technology and biochemistry. We're finished. Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth expressionlessly. Feeling the pain of his waist that was almost broken, he resisted the dizziness and calmly said, "How do you know?" "That batch of alloys," Shitian Mingzi smiled bitterly. "It was made by Shitian Financial Group, or rather, Night Spirit snatched it from somewhere else and processed it by Shitian Financial Group. I didn't know what East Island used it until today." Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat. He swallowed a mouthful of blood and said subconsciously, "You know their weaknesses?" "Weaknesses?" Chapter 150. In this world, there would be no truly perfect things without weaknesses, especially man-made products. Did the Kusanagi force have no weaknesses? Shitian Mingzi's words were directly filtered out by Li Tianlan. He could be sure that the Kusanagi force must have weaknesses, but they had not been discovered yet. Alloy bones, clear consciousness, super destructive power, no pain, no feelings, and amazing speed. In a flash, Li Tianlan had roughly sorted out the information of the Kusanagi force. Where were their weaknesses? The severe pain continued to spread in Li Tianlan's waist. The kick of number 7 was full of power. The alloy bones were fully exerted, and the power easily broke through the limit of the human body. This kind of super soldier between the scientific and technological forces was not suitable for the 4 realms of martial arts. They had no realm, only the most terrifying power and destructive power. In terms of pure power, that kick was almost equivalent to the full blow of a thunder-shocking realm master. Li Tianlan subconsciously touched his waist, and a warm blood covered his palm. His mind was spinning rapidly, but number 7 and number 8 in front of him did not give him time at all. Without Dubian Xiangyuan's further order, the 2 metal monsters in human skin had rushed over madly. "Retreat," Li Tianlan said in a deep voice and pushed Shitian Mingzi. Then he had switched places with the shadow and appeared behind number 7 and number 8. Shitian Mingzi stood aside with a desperate expression, biting her lip and saying nothing. The Kusanagi force had been awakened. Number 9 guarded Dubian Xiangyuan, which was equivalent to guarding the mechanism opened inside the Black Sun Institute. In other words, if they could not break through the blockade of the Kusanagi force and kill or capture Dubian Xiangyuan, they could not get out at all. In this research institute, Li Tianlan and the Kusanagi force were really a life-and-death battle. Shitian Mingzi silently retreated to the side. Her strength was not bad, but the strength at the peak of the ice-condensing realm could do nothing here. The full blow of any Kusanagi force warrior was enough to break her body. The only thing she could do was to wait. If Li Tianlan died, she would die. If Li Tianlan lived, she would live. The young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State. Shitian Mingzi took a deep breath and stared at Li Tianlan, not even blinking. Li Tianlan was still moving. The second shadow appeared. Then the third shadow. Li Tianlan's figure kept flashing, and the 3 shadows instantly stretched into a triangle. Number 7 and number 8 did not hesitate at all. Their eyes flashed with red light, and the chips implanted in their eyes directly locked on Li Tianlan's real body, chasing closely. Li Tianlan took the last step. The shadow never disappeared. The 3 shadows stood in different positions with Li Tianlan, immediately forming a regular quadrilateral. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly sharpened. He sheathed his sword. The 2 swords joined and extended, and the human emperor suddenly turned into a silver spear more than 2 meters long. The 3 shadows perfectly copied his movements at the same time. Li Tianlan's eyes were sharp. He raised his long spear and said in a low voice, "Stop." The 3 shadows simultaneously raised their hands. "Who?" The air in the research institute suddenly twisted in a shape visible to the naked eye. Large masses of air gathered toward number 7 and number 8, merging with the air in front of them that was compressed to the extreme. An ear-piercing friction sound that made one's scalp tingle rang out, and the entire research institute became blurry due to the extreme distortion of the air. The strong airflow suddenly stopped with Li Tianlan's voice. The bodies of number 7 and number 8 paused as if they were imprisoned. The whole process took less than a second, but Li Tianlan had already taken action again. He held the spear tightly with both hands. His body rose into the air. He raised the spear over his head and smashed it directly at number 8, who was walking in the front. Destroy. Buddhist incantation of 9 words, destroy formula. It was different from crack. If crack was the strongest outbreak, then destroy was the most ferocious crushing. Meet force with force, go forward with indomitable will. The three shadows followed Li Tianlan and flew up at the same time. For long spears fell from above and smashed directly at number 8's head. The confinement effect of the stop formula flashed away. The long spear fell from the air, and number 8 instinctively raised his arms to protect his head. Clang! The moment the silver spear collided with number 8's arms, flesh and blood splashed, but the sound was not a dull sound, but a roar similar to the collision of metals. All the flesh and blood on number 8's arms were completely torn apart, and a pair of alloy arms mixed with flesh and blood appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. The flesh and blood were blurred, and the metal was shining, which looked extremely disgusting. The long spear collided with the arms, and sparks flew everywhere. The distorted air surrounding the two of them spread wildly under the impact of this attack, bringing with it flying dust. The sharp, knife-like shockwave spread out in a circular shape. In the area of more than 10 meters around the three of them, countless utensils exploded one after another, and all kinds of experimental drugs of different colors scattered on the ground. Number 8's face was expressionless, but his body suddenly knelt on the ground under the blow. His weight of at least more than 400 kilograms crashed to the ground. In a blur of smoke and dust, number 8's huge body was smashed into the ground, and more than half of his body completely sank into the ground. At the moment when the long spear fell on number 8's arm, before the sparks rose, no. 7 had taken a sudden step forward and punched Li Tianlan hard in the chest. It was an indescribably huge force, violent and surging like a tide. Li Tianlan's face instantly turned pale. He held the long spear tightly in his hand, but his body was directly blasted out. The huge force drove his body to hit the alloy wall of the research institute. The thick alloy steel plate slid down with his body, and a faint human outline was directly imprinted on it. Li Tianlan's eyes blurred, and the whole world was spinning. Everything went black in front of his eyes, and he shook his head fiercely. At the moment when he regained consciousness, he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. His extremely strong aura suddenly weakened, and the palm holding the spear seemed to tremble slightly. Bang! More than 10 meters in front of Li Tianlan, number 8, whose body had sunk into the ground, suddenly stretched out his hand and hammered the floor beside him. His huge body struggled to stand up from the ground with the sound of metal crashing. His arms had no flesh and blood, but the alloy-covered hands reflected a bright luster, which made people feel cold inside. The next punch will fall on your head. Number 8 clenched his bloody hand and grinned hideously. Ant! Li Tianlan spat out a mouthful of blood again. Ant? His eyes narrowed, and his whole body was violent, as if he had fallen into a state of complete anger. He had the wind and thunder veins, the exquisite bone, and the heavenly king heart. He had the strongest inheritance in the dark world for hundreds of years. He entered the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 17. He was the heavenly son of the dark world, not an ant. He still had a long way to go. How could he die here? How dare he die here? Buzz! Li Tianlan suddenly held the long spear in his hand. The 2-meter-long silver spear vibrated slightly and buzzed. He swallowed the blood gushing out of the corner of his mouth, stood up against the wall, and held the human emperor tightly. Are you very good at fighting? He narrowed his eyes, and his tone was calm and soft. Number 7 and number 8 subconsciously stopped, looked at each other, and seemed to be a little stunned. An indescribable sense of danger emanated from Li Tianlan. He twisted his neck and said with a cold smile, I think I made a mistake. Skills are the most useless to deal with things like you, right? He raised the long spear and said softly, so now try again. Number 7 and number 8, kill him. Debian Xiangyuan frowned. As an ordinary person who didn't know martial arts, he noticed the strange and dangerous atmosphere. He didn't want to delay it anymore, so he ordered again. Number 7 and number 8's expressions changed. They suddenly roared and rushed to Li Tianlan. In everyone's sight, Li Tianlan clenched the long spear, also roared, and rushed up without hesitation. Shi Tianmingzi's eyes were dull. In her impression, the newly rising young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State seemed to have always been calm, even indifferent, seemingly soft and calm, but in fact, he was prouder than anyone else. His appearance might be very ordinary, but his every move had a deeply hidden but extremely dazzling style. But at this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to be a completely different person. With his roar, his speed was getting faster and faster. He raised the long spear in his hand and rushed to number 7 and number 8 without any fancy moves. His eyes seemed to be brighter than ever, and every move seemed to have a kind of violence and fierceness that seemed to fly out from the depths of his soul. Arrogant, wild and unparalleled. Bang! The distance between the two sides was less than 5 meters. Li Tianlan's shirt was torn in an instant. His bare upper body was covered with a large bruise on his chest, and there was blood flowing down from his waist. But his momentum was getting higher and higher, and the crazy killing intent and fighting intent continued to condense and rise in him, as if there was no end. Clang! Li Tianlan swept his silver spear, and it directly hit the chests of number 7 and number 8. In the sound of the metal collision, the two super warriors of the Kusanagi force took 2 steps back at the same time, and each step left a footprint. Li Tianlan's body had already leaped up, and he kicked number 7 in the head. At this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to have given up all martial arts. All he had was strength and speed. Number 7 was kicked in the face, and his body staggered back 7 or 8 meters. In a very short time, Li Tianlan swung his long spear in an arc and directly hit number 8. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, countless sounds of gold and iron colliding rang out violently and intensely. Li Tianlan's face was expressionless, and his movements were steady and swift. In the blink of an eye, he had hit number 8's arm more than 10 times. The alloy of number 8's arm shook violently, but it did not deform at all. Li Tianlan's eyes were ferocious. If 10 times were not enough, what about 100 times? Number 8's body was almost completely smashed into the ground, and number 7's body rushed back at the same time. But this time, Li Tianlan did not wait for number 7 to approach at all, and his body had already rushed over. He stabbed straight with his spear. With a crisp sound of impact, the slender and sharp spear had directly stabbed number 7's body. In an instant, the muscles of Li Tianlan's bare upper body bulged completely, and he kept exerting his strength. Number 8 tried to stand where he was, but Li Tianlan's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and he directly pushed his body against the wall behind him. Number 8's feet exerted force, and he kept sliding under Li Tianlan's push. His feet rubbed against the ground, and his flesh and blood splashed in an instant, but he seemed to feel nothing. He grasped the tip of the spear with one hand, and resisted Li Tianlan's strength. Boom! The long spear drove number 8's body into the alloy wall. In an instant, the long spear shortened into a short stick about 1 meter long. Li Tianlan held the short stick and madly smashed at number 8's body from head to toe. The dense sound of iron striking kept ringing, and pieces of flesh and blood splashed out one after another. Number 8's hands, chest, head, and legs began to show a metallic luster. The human skin seemed to be completely broken by Li Tianlan. Number 8 had become a bloody metal monster. Every muscle on his body was glowing with a cold and strange purple color, which was glued to the metal in his body. Countless light spots flickered on his body, and his resistance became more and more fierce. Crack! Li Tianlan's ribs were broken by number 8. Under the severe pain, his strength weakened slightly. Number 8 had already taken a step forward, strode forward, and directly hit Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, who was almost covered in blood, was knocked away on the spot. In the roar, number 7, who had climbed up from the ground again, suddenly caught Li Tianlan's body. He swung him wildly to the other side of the laboratory. A silver light flashed in the laboratory. The human emperor flew out of Li Tianlan's hand and fell in the corner. Li Tianlan's body smashed 2 experiment tables and slammed into the wall. But before number 7 and number 8 could react, his body flashed and appeared in front of them again. His aura seemed weak, but his whole body was full of a kind of desperate heat and madness. "Go on," he said, and his hands shook. After the human emperor left his hands, a huge icicle appeared directly in his hands. The icicle kept extending, and in an instant, it had become a huge pillar with a diameter of 1 meter and a length of more than 10 meters. All of Li Tianlan's reason seemed to have completely disappeared. His eyes flashed, full of fanatical fighting intent. He held the icicle with both hands, and suddenly swept it across. There was only Li Tianlan's completely crazy roar in the whole laboratory. He grabbed the icicle, which was already 20 meters long, and directly swept it on number 7 and number 8. It had nothing to do with power. The huge volume of the icicle directly swept number 7 and number 8 away. This overbearing and eccentric weapon whistled violently in the air. As the icicle swept past, all the instruments and lights in the laboratory that blocked its attack route exploded in an instant, and countless sparks burst. The icicle in Li Tianlan's hand danced wildly, and everything in the laboratory was completely broken. Everyone stared at the scene with their mouths agape. Shi Tianmingzi finally saw what a real young chosen one was. It was not only combat effectiveness, but also absolutely vigorous and unflinching fighting will. This absolutely overbearing and violent battle looked so cold, but the chosen one of Zhongzhou State not far away was so fanatical. In the desperate situation of life and death, Shi Tianmingzi's eyes were blurred, and even her lower body was a little wet. For the first time, she even felt that her father's words before leaving made some sense. If she could rely on the Samsara Palace through Li Tianlan, then even if she had some intimate relations with Li Tianlan behind her husband's back, it was definitely worth it, although it was not chaste. The huge icicle swept past, and in the countless bursting sparks, number 7 and number 8 waved their fists at the same time. Both of them were also bloody, but they were still vigorous. The huge icicle shattered in an instant. But the icicle in Li Tianlan's hand gathered together again in the explosion, and extended again. Li Tianlan went all out. The icicle in his hand expanded in an instant, and its diameter exceeded 5 meters in the blink of an eye. An icicle across the whole laboratory was formed again. Li Tianlan held the icicle high with both hands. He raised his arms to the sky. Boom! The icicle rotated in Li Tianlan's roar, and the lights of the whole laboratory flickered violently. All the instruments, computers, utensils, statues, and clocks were completely broken. The bodies of number 7 and number 8 had been knocked against the wall. Debian Xiangyuan, who had been watching the situation nervously, changed his face dramatically. He suddenly reached out and pointed at Li Tianlan, shouting, "Number 9, kill him quick!" Number 9 took a step forward. At the same time, the icicle in Li Tianlan's hand was once again broken by number 7 and number 8. The whole laboratory was stirred by the icicle, and the circuit system was completely destroyed. At the moment the icicle broke, the laboratory suddenly fell into darkness. Number 9's forward body suddenly stopped. Number 7 and number 8, who rushed to Li Tianlan, also froze in place, motionless like dead things. Li Tianlan froze for a moment, and waved his hands subconsciously. A fire lit up. In the fire, 3 super warriors of the Kusanagi force were frozen in place, and the light on their bodies had completely disappeared. General Fujiwara Ping, the top leader of the Divine Wind Force, stood together with Debian Xiangyuan, looking pale and desperate. Shi Tianmingzi was stunned and then ecstatic. She rushed to Li Tianlan's side and said in surprise, "Mr. Tianlan, the Kusanagi force is short of energy." "I know. We came in very suddenly, and Debian Xiangyuan had no time to replenish the energy of the Kusanagi force. Their previous battle had been supported by electricity. If we kill Debian Xiangyuan, our task will be completed." This battle was so fierce that if it continued, no one knew what the result would be. Now this dramatic change was a complete surprise for Shi Tianmingzi. Li Tianlan remained calm and said flatly, "Kill Debian Xiangyuan? I suddenly changed my mind. He is more useful alive than dead." He narrowed his eyes, looked at the thunder-shocking realm master beside Debian Xiangyuan who had lost his combat power, and said calmly, "Who is that?" Shi Tianmingzi's body was close to Li Tianlan, and she said quickly, "That is Fujiwara Ping, the top leader of the Divine Wind Force." Chapter 151. Take Debian Xiangyuan away and kill Tingyuan Ping. Shi Tianmingzi's body was slightly stiff. She looked at Li Tianlan, who stood in front of her with a calm face, with a complicated look in her eyes. The state of this young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State was obviously very bad now. His face was pale, and he was covered in blood. His aura was constantly fluctuating, from the peak to the trough, and then from the low to the peak. It seemed extremely unstable. But he stood there quietly, and there was a clear fighting intent that went straight into the sky. His injury was extremely serious, but Shi Tianmingzi had no doubt that Li Tianlan could fight again. The Kusanagi force had been implanted with a large number of alloys, and there were also control chips inside. From this point of view, although these super soldiers still had sober consciousness, they could no longer be called human beings. They were more like metal monsters. Once they were awakened with sufficient energy, they could even maintain their peak state, before they were completely destroyed. However, the Kusanagi force of the Black Sun Institute was obviously short of energy, which was a blessing in misfortune. Was it a blessing? Shi Tianmingzi thought in a daze. It should be like this, right? But why was there no joy of surviving a disaster in her heart? Countless sparks flickered in the space of the laboratory, and the light was flickering. Shi Tianmingzi's mind was full of the battle just now. It was a real tragic battle, a real battle to the death. Li Tianlan, who had completely lost his calmness, seemed to exude an invincible will that could make everyone kneel on the ground. It was indescribable fierceness and dominance, like a god descending to the world, like the god of war coming to the world, moving forward with indomitable will and never retreat. What would be the result if they continued to fight? In Shi Tianmingzi's mind, the Kusanagi force was an absolutely invincible team. But at this moment, she suddenly found that for the follow-up of this battle, if they continued to fight, she actually thought that Li Tianlan would not necessarily lose. Shi Tianmingzi looked at Li Tianlan in a daze, and her eyes were in a trance. This was a man who looked calm but hid all the crazy and strong aggression in his bones. After removing his disguise, his every move seemed to reveal a kind of almost dazzling dominance and indifference. This feeling was so majestic that it was almost irresistible. Shi Tianmingzi subconsciously took a step forward, but she hesitated. "Why are you hesitating?" Li Tianlan asked calmly. The blood on his body was still flowing, but he could clearly feel that the speed of the blood flow was getting slower and slower. His internal organs seemed to be torn apart. After the burning pain, he felt cool like a clear spring. The vitality contained in the immortality potion still played a role. Although it could not make him recover immediately, at least it could keep his injury from continuing to deteriorate uncontrollably. Shi Tianmingzi gritted her teeth and walked forward quickly. Kill Ting Yuanping, and leave Debian Xiang Yuan alive. The latter was Li Tianlan's temporary change of mind, while the former, to some extent, could also be regarded as a pledge of allegiance that she handed over to Li Tianlan. Although such a pledge of allegiance could not play a big role, at least it could not play a big role in the general trend of the two countries. For her personally, the strength of this pledge of allegiance was quite significant. There was a big difference between having it and not having it. Shi Tianmingzi moved forward. He continued to advance through the pile of ruins. His figure was elegant, but his killing intent was overflowing. Debian Xiang Yuan, covered in blood and with a pale face, subconsciously supported Ting Yuanping, who had lost his combat power, and kept retreating. His eyes widened, and he still stared at the three soldiers of the Kusanagi force who had been motionless. He muttered in Japanese in a daze, "Impossible, impossible." Although every super soldier of the Kusanagi force needed to replenish energy, Debian Xiang Yuan, as one of the main creators of the Kusanagi force, knew very well that although the three super soldiers were short of energy to wake up the Kusanagi force this time, they did not completely rely on electricity. The energy in each of them was enough for them to fight for at least an hour. But how long did they fight with Li Tianlan? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? In such a short period of time, their energy had been completely depleted? Damn it! Just how intense was the battle? Shi Tianmingzi sighed slightly, reached out her hand and said softly, "Doctor, come with me. For the sake of our previous relationship, as long as you cooperate with me, I can guarantee that you will not be hurt." Both the Black Sun Institute and Shitian Financial Group once belonged to Night Spirit, so Shi Tianmingzi was no stranger to Debian Xiang Yuan. They could even be said to be very familiar with each other. Debian Xiang Yuan looked at Shi Tianmingzi in a daze and was silent. After a long time, the corner of his mouth moved, and he said in a dry voice, You, Shi Tianmingzi. Before Debian Xiangyuan's voice died away, Ting Yuanping's furious roar suddenly sounded. Do you know what you are doing? This is treason. The whole Shitian clan will not be forgiven. Traitors should die. The superior at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, who had lost his combat power after fighting with Li Tianlan without any fancy moves in a short time, struggled and tried to stand in front of Debian Xiangyuan. His face was ferocious, and his eyes were full of undisguised hatred. Do you Shitian Financial Group want to be the shame of East Island? The Divine Wind Force will not let you go. Any traitor will die under the sharp blade of the Divine Wind Force. Shi Tianmingzi silently looked at the general of East Island, who looked a little crazy in front of her, and there was a kind of obvious sadness and disappointment in her eyes. Ting Yuanping, an important figure in the East Island militarist group, was one of the top leaders of the Divine Wind Force. Compared to his position, his strength was not outstanding. The reason why he could get this position today was because of his loyalty. His almost fanatical loyalty to East Island. From the standpoint of East Island, Ting Yuanping might not have done well for many years, but it was hard for others to say anything bad about him. Although he was the backbone of the militarist group, that was just his idea. After joining the Divine Wind Force for many years, he had never participated in the internal intrigue of East Island, whether it was the game between Night Spirit and the East Island government, or the undercurrent between the government and the royal family. Ting Yuanping had always been neutral. Among all the generals in East Island, he could be said to be the poorest one. He drove an ordinary domestic Toyota, lived in an apartment less than 100 meters away, was not greedy for money, not lecherous, and lived alone. All kinds of medals he got over the years almost covered half of the wall. He had never participated in the civil war of East Island, but in foreign battles, he always took the lead, rushed the fastest, and retreated the slowest. He was a very pure soldier, loyal, fearless, and hot-blooded. The major groups in East Island were also intertwined, but Ting Yuanping of the militarist group was a rare figure, who could be respected by all parties. In his own words, for more than 20 years, since he joined the East Island Divine Wind Force, every drop of blood on his body had been shed with a clear conscience. A real soldier, or a real hero, at least in the hearts of the people of East Island, Ting Yuanping was like this. Even Ting Yuanping himself didn't know that the daughter of Shitian Financial Group, who was standing in front of him at this time and was about to attack him, had regarded him as an idol a few years ago. Mr. Ting Yuan, Shi Tianmingzi spoke softly, and a long sword made of ice took shape in her hand. It was crystal clear and chilling. You are a hero, and you should have a heroic ending, but I'm sorry. She whispered, and the long sword in her hand shook. The cold sword blade pierced into Ting Yuanping's chest, and went through his chest. Shi Tianmingzi's hand holding the sword trembled slightly. Because of excitement, her face was obviously flushed, which looked gorgeous and enchanting. Ting Yuanping calmed down, and his eyes were fixed on Shi Tianmingzi, without blinking. The long sword that pierced his chest began to melt. His body shook slightly, and he struggled to point in the direction of Li Tianlan. Then he looked at Shi Tianmingzi and said in a hoarse voice, "Enemies, traitors, all deserve to die. The people of East Island." Before he finished his words, his body shook and fell directly to the ground. Shi Tianmingzi took a deep breath, trembling all over, and bowed deeply to Ting Yuanping. Then she grabbed Debian Xiangyuan's collar almost violently and dragged his body directly to Li Tianlan in the doctor's constant struggle. "You did a good job," Li Tianlan said in a calm tone. When he said this, he had picked up the human emperor and the box containing the sky attack. The silver metal box was opened. Li Tianlan took the syringe and injected a tube of pale red liquid into his arm. The strong fighting intent in his body had disappeared, and his breath had become stable. Shi Tianmingzi looked at Li Tianlan indifferently and said in a stiff tone, "We have to leave here immediately. What are you going to do with Debian Xiangyuan? Give him to Zhongzhou State?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes subconsciously and looked at Debian Xiangyuan seriously. Debian Xiangyuan looked about 60 years old. Because he did research all year round, his actual age should be younger. A large amount of blood stained his clothes and face at this time. In his struggle, Li Tianlan could not see his specific appearance. The only impression he had was that his glasses were very thick. Let me go. What do you want to do? You. Bang! Li Tianlan suddenly stretched out his hand and knocked the doctor out. His eyes were narrowed, but there was a very complicated light in them. Shi Tianmingzi could even clearly see the brightness in his eyes. It was a kind of look that she was familiar with. It was fanatical and eager. To be exact, it was called ambition. He wants to stay. Li Tianlan said calmly. How about handing him over to Shitian Financial Group for the time being? Shi Tianmingzi's heart moved. She was keenly aware of the subtle position of the heavenly son of Zhongzhou State. She just nodded silently, thoughtfully. Li Tianlan found a snow-white research suit in the laboratory and put it on. Then he walked out of the door. The space of the institute outside the laboratory was dark. In the silent atmosphere, Li Tianlan could even clearly hear the suppressed and frightened gasps in the rooms on both sides. Li Tianlan walked into the elevator with no expression on his face. His goal was Dubian Yuan. As for the other minions in the institute, he had no interest in killing them at all. And the time did not allow it. He walked into the elevator and looked at the time in the elevator screen. It had been 20 minutes since they entered the Black Sun Institute. The time that the Shitian clan used the instrument to shield all nearby communication signals was 30 minutes. They had to leave as soon as possible. The elevator went straight up from the second floor. In the elevator, Li Tianlan suddenly said, "Let your people come down later and carry number 9 up. Hurry up." Shi Tianmingzi carried Dubian Yuan and agreed. Number 9 had been guarding Dubian Yuan all the time. There were no scars on his body. From the research point of view, number 9 was undoubtedly the most complete. Carrying Dubian Yuan's body, Shi Tianmingzi suddenly thought of Li Tianlan's eyes, which were as hot as a wildfire that could burn everything. Could it be that this man wanted to create a super army of his own? East Island has the Kusanagi force. Mingzi, is there a similar super force in Zhongzhou State? The elevator entered the first floor. Li Tianlan and Shi Tianmingzi went all the way up and returned to the main hall of Sensoji. They didn't stop and went straight out of the temple. Shi Tianmingzi glanced at him with a strange look in her eyes. She was silent for a while, then nodded and said, "There must be. And the super force of Zhongzhou State, even if it is not the most powerful in the world, is definitely one of the most powerful super forces. Technically speaking, East Island and Zhongzhou State are at a great disadvantage." She paused and continued, "It's just that I don't know the code name of the super force of Zhongzhou State. In fact, if Shitian Financial Group didn't decide to go all out, I wouldn't even know the Kusanagi force." Li Tianlan nodded and was silent in thought. The two stepped through the front hall and went straight out of the gate of Sensoji. In their sight, 100 meters away, several off-road vehicles were still parked there quietly, without any movement. Shi Tianmingzi frowned, quickened her pace a little, and approached the off-road team. In the night, the team was quiet. The distance of 30 meters was enough for people inside and outside the car to see everything clearly, but the team was still motionless, and no one got off to greet them. Li Tianlan and Shi Tianmingzi's heart sank at the same time, and they stopped subconsciously. "How could you appear here?" A soft, almost charming voice suddenly sounded in the night wind, surrounding the ears of Li Tianlan and Shi Tianmingzi. "So, Shitian clan is going to commit treason, right?" Li Tianlan and Shi Tianmingzi tightened their bodies at the same time. In their sight, 30 meters away, on the roof of the off-road team at the forefront, the quiet air suddenly stirred under the starry sky. The air was like a wave, spreading layer by layer like ripples. The research suit on Li Tianlan's body fluttered backward in the surging air, and Shi Tianmingzi's long hair fluttered backward in the ripple-like air waves. In front of the silent Sensoji, the wind suddenly blew. On the roof of the off-road vehicle, a bright red female figure suddenly appeared. She looked at Shi Tianmingzi, frowned slightly, and then her calm eyes fell directly on Li Tianlan. It was a young woman who looked to be at most 25 or 26 years old. She was at most 1.6 meters tall, and her figure was extremely petite. Her black hair was soft and smooth, and her face in particular could be said to be extremely charming. She wore a fiery red dress that was like a raging flame, and as the skirt fluttered, it revealed a pair of smooth, white, and tender thighs. Her entire body emitted an extremely charming yet dangerous temptation. Beautiful legs, dressed in red. She stood quietly on the roof of the car, but exuded an aggressive and enchanting beauty, charming and wild. Among all the women Li Tianlan had seen since he entered the secular world, Qin Weibai was one, Wang Yuetong was half a goddess, and the woman in red in front of him could also be regarded as half a goddess. She was extremely beautiful and charming. A stunner? No, she was an enemy. Li Tianlan's eyes were always clear. He stared at the woman in red tens of meters away with a cold expression. The woman appeared here. There was no doubt that the elites of Shitian clan outside had all been killed. Li Tianlan? The woman in red stood on the roof of the car and tilted her head. Tilting her head, the biting cold wind continued to spread with her as the core. Her fine black hair and red dress fluttered in the wind, making her look even more extraordinary and refined. Teacher said he would kill you in person. The woman in red looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, "But I don't think you deserve to be killed by him. So I'm here." Li Tianlan's body became more and more tense, and he said coldly, "Kill me? Do you deserve it?" The woman in red smiled and said, "You have young heavenly sons in Zhongzhou State. Do you think?" She abruptly raised a small white hand. A delicate folding fan with a fragrance moved like lightning. The blade of the fan opened and rushed directly to Li Tianlan. The cold wind in the air suddenly stopped, and the bright fire that could almost illuminate the sky spread instantly from her body. In an instant, the whole world seemed to be covered by the raging flames that rose to the sky. The folding fan in the air trembled wildly, and the soft, charming, and somewhat sweet voice of the woman in red continued. "Do you think that East Island doesn't have any? There were young heavenly sons in Zhongzhou State, but there were none in East Island?" Before the voice fell, the body of the woman in red had appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. She reached out and grabbed the folding fan. The raging flame and the cold wind rose to the sky at the same time, but her hand suddenly chopped down. The blade of the fan opened and closed. The dangerous edge was waved in an instant, unscrupulous. Shi Tianmingzi carried Debian Xiangyuan and turned to run without hesitation. She jumped out of the sea of fire with the old doctor on her shoulder and screamed, "Tianlanjun, kill her! She is the young heavenly son of East Island, my Shiranui." Li Tianlan switched places with his shadow in an instant. But before he could stand firm, the attack of the woman in red had come to him again. His red robe fluttered in the raging flames. All the flames were dancing wildly. Chapter 152. June 14th. The storm was still raging in every corner of Dongdu. The rain columns connecting the sky and the earth were flying all over the sky, roaring in the violent wind. The entire Dongdu and the storm gave people a dangerous feeling of lingering on death's door. It seemed to be affected by the weather. The atmosphere inside the whole East Island seemed to become gloomy and depressing in the storm. The storm hit Dongdu, but the real storm had swept the whole East Island within dozens of hours. Chaos came as expected, like an ignited explosive. As the fuse burned to the end, the calm situation suddenly broke out in a nearly overturned state. Countless flames rose to the sky. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. In a very short time, the whole East Island seemed to be filled with a violent and messy beauty. 6:40 in the morning. Ninghu, the director of the intelligence department of Yamaguchi-gumi, disappeared on his way to the headquarters. 7:15 in the morning. Dongdu. Senior Counselor Kiyakawa Du also walked out of his house and got into his own car. The car didn't even travel 200 meters before it exploded violently. The surging flames completely engulfed everything around it. The driver, the bodyguards, and even Kiyakawa Du himself were all turned into a pile of charcoal in the violent explosion. 7:30 in the morning. Dongdu. In less than a day after the chaos subsided, several mysterious superiors led a team to raid Takeshita Street. Countless special warfare agencies suffered heavy losses before they could react. Several leaders of special warfare agencies were killed. The scene was horrible. 8 o'clock in the morning. Fuyong Peak, the holy mountain. The divine wind force finally responded. The first group of 50 elites just went down the mountain. They were ambushed before they even walked out of the foot of the mountain. The 50 elites of the divine wind force were all wiped out. Their vehicles rolled down the mountain. It looked like a traffic accident. The storm was still heavy. From 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the whole East Island, Dongdu, Ninghu, Changdao, Xiantai, Mingu, Jubin, Bingang, Jingzhong, Futai, in countless areas, all kinds of accidents and attacks appeared one after another. People from all walks of life died or disappeared because of all kinds of accidents. In less than a day, the whole East Island fell into a chaotic situation that had never been seen in decades. Blood was everywhere. Dead people were everywhere. This kind of continuous assassination and attack seemed to have no sign of stopping. As time went by, this series of bloody assassinations was bound to continue. On this day, it did not feel like the collision of the dark world at all, but the prelude to a world war. A large number of assassinations involved various domains, including the royal family, the political circle, the military, business and finance, the underworld, the special warfare system, various consortiums and various shrines. A large number of assassins hidden in the dark seemed to have no specific target at all. In other words, anyone who was influential in a certain field could be said to be their target. All aspects of East Island took action. The police, the military, the special warfare system, and the underworld forces all responded immediately. After a lot of bloody assassinations, the whole East Island seemed to be moving toward a more chaotic direction. The day. The day. Dong Island. On the third day after all the elites of Zhongzhou State sneaked into East Island safely, the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State finally showed its sharpest and coldest fangs on the land of this neighboring country. The vehicles from the royal family and the cabinet once again headed straight for Furong Peak. The two top aides, Song Xiaoying and Zhuoha Hengxin, who represented the will of the Mikado and the Prime Minister respectively, went straight to the Divine Wind Force to meet the only superior of the invincible realm in East Island, Supreme Ninja Shinichi Miyamoto. At the same time, in the Azure Pool Hot Spring Club, an internal meeting was also being held. It's not big enough. In the conference room, Tribulation, dressed in black, sat in the main seat. His first sentence shocked everyone. Not all the people in the conference room were in the conference room. Many of them were still outside and hadn't come back yet. But obviously, Tribulation didn't want to wait any longer. He looked at the list in his hand and frowned slightly. After a few seconds of silence, he said in a low and hoarse voice, "Who can tell me what's going on?" What Tribulation held in his hand was an extremely long list. The densely packed names were arranged on the A4 paper in his hand, and there were even more than one page. At a rough glance, there were at least hundreds of people on the list. However, many of the names had been crossed out, which was the mark of death. But compared with this part of the people, there were obviously more people who had not been crossed out. Tribulation frowned and looked at it for a while. Then he threw the list on the table in front of him and said lightly, "Everyone, is that all we can do? It's a little strange." Yi Fengcheng sat next to Tribulation, looking a little distressed. He rubbed his forehead, as if he didn't know how to express himself. These people are collected by Director Han over the years. It can be said to be a very important list. In theory, if we kill all these people, East Island will be in chaos for a while. But now the situation is that we have the list and the information, but many people can't be found. He took the list on the table and sighed. Here, these are the people. It's so strange. There are a lot of people here, especially some masters of the special warfare system. After we rushed over, we couldn't see them at all. At most, we killed a few small fries. It was useless to torture them, because even those people didn't know where the target went. I really doubt whether they are masters or cowards. As for the others, there are a lot of guts, such as the vice president of the bank, and the chairman of the board of directors. They can be found easily, but some masters have disappeared inexplicably. As Yi Fengcheng spoke, he lit a cigarette. After looking around, he said helplessly, "Is there anyone who has encountered the same thing as me?" Tribulation raised his eyebrows and glanced at the others. There weren't many people sitting at this conference table now. To be exact, there were only 4, including Tribulation. As the strongest master that Zhongzhou State put in East Island, Tribulation didn't participate in the series of assassinations outside. His eyes were fixed on Fu Peak all the time. The other 3 people, Yi Fengcheng, Flaming Fire, and Gu Yunxia, were not idle. Bai Yuming, Horsewoman, and the Enchantress hadn't come back yet. Everyone was on the move. After Yi Fengcheng went out once, the situation he encountered was a little strange. Tribulation looked at Flaming Fire and Gu Yunxia and asked, "What about you?" "Almost the same." Gu Yunxia frowned and said in a low voice. Among the first group of elites from Zhongzhou State who sneaked into East Island, Gu Yunxia could be said to be the representative. Although she and Tribulation had a sharp stand, she could still distinguish the basic situation outside Zhongzhou State. "I also went to a few places. Some of them were fruitful, but some of them were empty, especially the masters of the special warfare system. No one was in their bases or at home. It seemed that they had been away for a while. As for some people in other fields, they also have a wide range of activities, so it's normal that they can't be found. But how could the masters of the special warfare system disappear inexplicably?" Several people at the table narrowed their eyes almost at the same time. "I'm from East Island, so I'm more familiar with this place than you guys. What I encountered was similar. I often couldn't find anyone. And I also went to a few places where they were most likely to go, but they were also empty. It's said that some of them haven't been here for a while." Flaming Fire took a deep breath and looked serious. The helpless expression on Yi Fengcheng's face suddenly became serious. Today was the first day of action, and he missed a few targets. He thought it was his bad luck, but this kind of situation happened to everyone. Obviously, there was an inside story. And these were all masters of the special warfare system. If they suddenly disappeared, where could they go? And where could they go? Have they left East Island? Yi Fengcheng took a big drag on his cigarette and said suddenly. Flaming Fire was stunned and said subconsciously, "If they're not in East Island, where can they go?" The conference room suddenly became quiet. Several people looked at each other and thought of a possibility at the same time. "Those lunatics from Zhongzhou State are crazy. Their actions are too big. Do they want to start a world war? Your Highness Miyamoto, now only you can punish them. We think it's time to send out all the Divine Wind Force to maintain the stability of the special warfare system of East Island." At the same time, in the headquarters of the Divine Wind Force. In the conference room, the top advisor of the royal family, Song Xiaoying, paced back and forth and shouted excitedly. When Song Xiaoying, who had always been calm and gentle, almost completely lost his composure, Zhuohe Hengxin sat aside in silence. He just looked at Shinichi Miyamoto, who sat opposite him, without saying a word. In less than a day, nearly 200 people were assassinated. And it wasn't just 200 people who were insignificant. Every one of the victims had a sensitive identity, more or less. It was easy to imagine how chaotic East Island was. East Island had always been one of the countries with the strongest special warfare system. It was the first time in decades that such a chaotic situation had happened. It was a great shame. The Divine Wind Force was the power center of the special warfare system of East Island. If they didn't take action now, when would they? At present, we can basically confirm it. Feeling Song Xiaoying's excitement, Shinichi Miyamoto, whose face was still covered by a black scarf, said in a calm tone. "Now a large number of elites of Zhongzhou State have sneaked into East Island. What happened today can be said to be Zhongzhou State's provocation to East Island. Your Highness Miyamoto." Zhuohe Hengxin suddenly opened his mouth. His tone was still respectful, but there was a hint of toughness in it. "In fact, we don't want to listen to any analysis. What the royal family and the cabinet need most is how to solve the current situation. East Island must be stable, and all the enemies must be eliminated." "Of course." Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes flashed inexplicably. He said blandly, "In fact, compared to the Mikado and the Prime Minister, I'm more anxious. But I have to stay rational." He stood up from his seat, and his powerful momentum instantly filled the whole conference room. So far, Zhongzhou State has a big plan. It seems that they not only want the power of Night Spirit in East Island, but also want to severely damage the special warfare system of East Island. No, they have already started to do that. Strength and appetite are relative. Since Zhongzhou State dares to do this, it means that they will put a lot of power into East Island this time. And to be honest, I'm in a dilemma now. Zhua Hengxin and Song Xiaoying fell silent at the same time. Dilemma. Of course they knew why Shinichi Miyamoto was in a dilemma. What happened today was the most chaotic situation in East Island in recent decades. But at the same time, the special warfare system of East Island was also the weakest in recent decades. They were not weak, but too much power was not in East Island at all. Instead they had sneaked into Zhongzhou State. They are in Zhongzhou State. After a short silence, Yi Fengcheng finally spoke. His tone was not shock or fear, but incredulity. So many people. Are they not in East Island, but all in Zhongzhou State? Are the Japanese tired of living? Craziness and perverseness are in the genes of East Islanders. The battle between Castellan and Samsara tomorrow will attract a lot of attention. I think not only East Island, but other forces will also send a lot of elites into Zhongzhou State. If it's a life and death battle tomorrow, after the battle, these foreign forces may take the opportunity to deal a fatal blow to the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. For those who don't know the inside story, they will definitely bet on such a good opportunity. Gu Yunxia glanced at flaming fire beside her, and then said with a poker face, "This is really..." Yi Fengcheng's smile was very complicated, with excitement, joy, and a trace of disbelief. Everyone knew that East Island would definitely send people to Zhongzhou State. But Yi Fengcheng did not expect that there would be so many people. The masters of the special warfare system on the list alone were a very strong force. Together with Tianhai Wuji and Luxing Sangchuan, two superiors of the invincible realm in Zhongzhou State, it could be said that East Island put more than half of its elites in Zhongzhou State this time. How crazy was this decision? It was simply the courage of a moron. But if he thought about it carefully, the reason why East Island dared to bet might be that the resentment between Samsara and Kunlun City was real. If the battle tomorrow was really a lose-lose situation, it was really hard to say how much effect East Island's force would play. And it could be foreseen that not only East Island, but also the Jiang family, Knights Templars, and Fantasy World would also send elites into Zhongzhou State. If these forces were added together, it would be really terrible. Zhongzhou State must be a gathering of storms now. But tomorrow's battle was destined to have no big loss, so Yi Fengcheng had nothing to worry about. In that case, our trip to East Island can be more relaxed. Yi Fengcheng smiled and said softly, "Don't be careless." Tribulation glanced at Yi Fengcheng and shook his head. After all, this is East Island. Integrate the resources of East Island? In the Divine Wind Force, Zhua Hengxin looked at Shinichi Miyamoto in front of him in disbelief. It's the only way. Shinichi Miyamoto's tone was cold and firm. This is our home field, but now it's hard for me to be sure that we have the upper hand. God knows how many people Zhongzhou State has invested in East Island. Situd Songyuan? Gu Qianchuan? These are all uncertain factors. We have a lot of superiors of the Thundershocking realm who have sneaked into Zhongzhou State. Now facing the power of Zhongzhou State, do we have to rely on the elites of the Divine Wind Force to fight? I need superiors. Zhongzhou State is only a few hours away from East Island. Maybe we can call back some of the superiors of Zhongzhou State. Song Xiaoying said hesitantly. Before he finished, he smiled bitterly. Call back. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded. That's a good idea. But can they come back now? He turned around and looked at the snow on Fu Peak through the glass of the conference room. He said expressionlessly, "If the final battle between the master of Samsara Palace and the god of war of Zhongzhou State is a trap, then all of us in Zhongzhou State may become the bargaining chips in the hands of the opponent. They may come back, but not now." Song Xiaoying sighed deeply and suddenly felt powerless. When the news of the final battle in Zhongzhou State first spread, how many people thought it was fake? It was about the ranking on the divine list and the rise and growth of the Samsara Palace. It was about the political situation of Zhongzhou State and the overall situation of the Dark World. Plus, Qin Weibai's man was Li Tianlan. All kinds of reasons seemed to prove the authenticity and seriousness of this battle. The scheme set up by Samsara Palace and Zhongzhou State might not be flawless, but everyone saw a beautiful future. The huge benefits made them instinctively ignore the possible risks. But now that they thought about it, the master of Samsara Palace destroyed Night Spirit. And what she was after was definitely more than a murderous weapon. It seemed wiser to join forces with Zhongzhou State to plot against East Island. But they ignored this at that time. This mistake was so serious that it directly pushed the whole East Island into an extremely embarrassing situation. Now it was useless to inform Tianhai Wuji and Luxing Sangchuan. It was better to let them calm down and watch the battle before considering other things. Integrate the resources of all systems and concentrate our strength to fight against the enemy. At least we can't give the enemy a chance to break us one by one. At the same time, I propose again that we completely wake up the Kusanagi force and take out all the forces we can use. In this situation we have no time. Shinichi Miyamoto's tone became more and more indifferent. No time? Song Xiaoying asked subconsciously and then said with a wry smile. As far as I know, even if the Mikado and Mr. Prime Minister agree to integrate the resources, it will take more than 1 or 2 days. Special cases, special cases. Shinichi Miyamoto shook his head. We don't have to integrate all the resources. As long as our strength can destroy the enemy, that's enough. After all, this is East Island. Please tell the Prime Minister and the Mikado that this is a war of the Dark World, but not only a war of the Dark World. At the critical moment, I need their full support. Song Xiaoying and Zhuoha Hengxin straightened up at the same time and bowed deeply. Yes. Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and suddenly said, how about the Kusanagi force of the Black Sun Institute? 2 soldiers are damaged more than 35%. They can join the battle after repair. It will take about a week. Song Xiaoying said slowly. Your Highness Miyamoto, the Mikado agreed to wake up all the Kusanagi force in principle. I think the royal family will give a clear attitude when I go back. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded, narrowed his eyes and said thoughtfully, Shitian Financial Group? Shitian Ningji has released a statement, saying that he and Shitian Mingzi are no longer father and daughter, and expelled her from Shitian Financial Group. At present, Shitian Mingzi has become a traitor, and the royal family has sent an elite team to rescue Dr. Watanabe. Song Xiaoying's tone was flat, but when he mentioned Shitian Financial Group, there was a trace of coldness and killing intent in his tone. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded and said with a smile, Dr. Watanabe will be fine. The royal rescue team doesn't need to follow too closely. If everything goes well, they will all appear here. He reached out his hand and pointed at the map of East Island on the conference table, his eyes deep. This is... The 2 aides representing the royal family and the office of the Prime Minister looked over subconsciously, their eyes confused. The place of the final battle. Shinichi Miyamoto said calmly. Bang! In the serious and depressing discussion, the door of the conference room was suddenly pushed open. Han Shixuan, who had hidden in East Island for many years and controlled all the intelligence, hurried in. His expression was calm, but his eyes showed a sense of exasperation and anxiety. Everyone's heart suddenly sank. What's wrong? Tribulation's eyes instantly focused, and he said in a deep voice. Something happened. Han Shixuan's calm face became a little pale. At present, it can be confirmed that Wang Shengxiao, Li Tianlan, and Gu Hanshan are all in danger. The 3 of them have all lost contact. Before he finished speaking, everyone's expression changed dramatically. Almost all the experts present had taken action, so the work of contacting Wang Shengxiao, Li Tianlan, and the others was handed over to Han Shixuan's people. No one expected that in less than 2 days, the 3 young heavenly sons, who were likely to represent the strongest combat force in Zhongzhou State in the future, had all lost contact. What the hell happened? Tribulation subconsciously clenched his fists, but his tone became calmer. It's not clear now. I'm asking people to collect intelligence. The only news I got now is that Tianlan is very likely to encounter the Kusanagi force in Sensoji. As for Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan, there's no news for the time being. Han Shixuan's tone was heavy, and his heart was almost twisted. He knew very well what these three young people meant to the future of Zhongzhou State. If something happened to these three people, Han Shishun's mouth twitched, and he didn't dare to continue thinking for a moment. Kusanagi Force. Tribulation Yi Fengcheng Guyunxia, and flaming fire stood up at the same time. How could the Kusanagi Force appear in the Black Sun Institute? It's our fault. We didn't collect enough intelligence. We didn't expect that such a precious superforce would appear in the Black Sun Institute. We underestimated the importance of the Black Sun Institute before, so the accident happened. Damn it. The more Han Shishun said, the angrier he became. At last, he couldn't help cursing. Swish. Before he finished speaking, Flaming Fire's body had directly rushed out of the conference room with lightning. The Kusanagi Force. Given the status of these people present, they were no strangers to the name of the Kusanagi Force. What they lacked was their understanding of the Kusanagi Force. This superforce, which combined biotechnology and high-tech, was definitely more difficult to deal with than most experts. It was a real killing machine. Li Tianlan should have encountered the Kusanagi Force for a moment. The whole conference room fell into a dead silence. What about Wang Shengxiao and Gu Hanshan? Yi Fengcheng was silent for a while and suddenly asked. Han Shishun shook his head and said with a gloomy expression, "We're still investigating. There's no news for the time being." The look in Yi Fengcheng's eyes changed, and he subconsciously glanced at Tribulation. Gu Yinxia wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. Tribulation stood in front of the conference table and was silent for a full 5 minutes. Then he said in a low voice, "Let all our people take action and find a way to find them. After getting in touch with them, we can confirm their status. If you want to find them, you can leave Dongdu. Find them first." Leave Dongdu. Yi Fengcheng frowned and muttered to himself. No one knew what he was thinking. This should also be the plan of the East Island government. Obviously, they already know of our existence and have taken the three young heavenly sons as a breakthrough point. They intend to use them as bargaining chips to force us to leave Dongdu. Han Shishun said quickly. It seems that East Island has reacted, and they have even begun to choose the place of the final battle. The place of the final battle? Zhuohe Hengxin looked at the map with a strange look in his eyes, looking at Shinichi Miyamoto's indifferent eyes. Why here? Anywhere is fine. As long as it's not Dongdu. Shinichi Miyamoto shook his head. At present, it seems that this is the most suitable place. Shi Tianmingzi defected to Li Tianlan. She brought Dr. Watanabe, so she must meet with Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, Wang Shengxiao, and Gu Hanshan were the three strongest young heavenly sons in Zhongzhou State. They all had huge forces behind them. As long as they were forced here, all the forces of Zhongzhou State would also gather here. They couldn't give up these three people, absolutely not. So we only need to use a small amount of forces to track their whereabouts, and put all the integrated forces into the final battle. The right time, right place, and right people are on our side, and we will be the final winner. In this case, Song Xiaoying pondered and said respectfully, "Please forgive me for being presumptuous. Your Highness, if this is really so simple, why don't you do it yourself? As long as you personally..." He paused before he could finish his sentence. Because Shinichi Miyamoto shook his head with extreme irritation and said in a cold tone, "I can't go down the mountain now." The two aides were stunned at the same time. "Someone is targeting me," Shinichi Miyamoto said. "Although I don't know who it is, I'm sure that someone is targeting me now. It's very dangerous. If I act rashly, I may die." "Probably so." Tribulation looked at Han Shishun and nodded. Then he said, "So we must find them as soon as possible, and even bring them back. I don't mind fighting with East Island, but the battlefield and the initiative of the war must be in our hands. If we let them arrange it, we will be too passive. It will be very dangerous for us, no matter the time or the situation." He paused for a second and continued, "So, everyone, bring them back before East Island catches them completely." Yi Fengcheng looked at Tribulation, who was standing straight, and suddenly said with a strange look in his eyes, "You're not going?" "I can't go." Tribulation shook his head. "I have to keep an eye on a person. If he doesn't move, I can't move. He paused for a while and continued. If the battlefield is finally determined, I will probably set off with him, or find a chance to kill him in advance. That you're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.